Hey there, welcome to Brad Arrows. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. If these stories give you chills, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Get cozy and let the fear take over. The old Morrison farm had stood empty for nearly a decade before we bought it. Situated in a quiet valley of the White Mountains, the 19th century farmhouse seemed perfect for our small family. My husband Nathan, our 6-year-old daughter Rachel, and me. The realtor mentioned something about the previous owners leaving suddenly. But in our excitement about finding an affordable piece of New England history, we didn't press for details. The house itself was a classic example of colonial architecture, with its central chimney and saltbox roof. The previous owners had begun renovations, but left them unfinished, leaving us with a mixture of modern amenities and historical features. The kitchen had new appliances, but the living room still housed the original cooking fireplace, complete with its iron crane for hanging pots. We moved in during early autumn, when the maples were beginning to turn crimson and gold. The first few weeks were consumed with unpacking and continuing the renovations. Nathan, being handy with tools, took on most of the work himself. That's how he discovered the first sign that something wasn't quite right with our new home. He was replacing some rotted floorboards in the living room when he found it. A small leather-bound book wedged between the floor joists. The pages were filled with handwritten entries dating back to 1873, detailing what appeared to be ritual practices. The writer, Elizabeth Morrison, described communicating with those who dwell between worlds through the house's central chimney, which she called the gateway. We might have dismissed it as the imaginative writings of a lonely frontier woman, but then the sounds began. It started with footsteps in the attic, soft at first, like someone trying to move quietly across old boards. Then came the whispers, seemingly emerging from the walls themselves, speaking words we could almost, but not quite, understand. Rachel was the first to see her. She came running into our bedroom one night, saying there was a lady in her room wearing a long black dress. "She stands by my window and cries," Rachel said matter-of-factly. "She's looking for something she lost." We assumed it was just a child's nightmare until we found the photograph. While clearing out the attic, I discovered a daguerreotype tucked inside an old family Bible. It showed a woman in a black dress standing beside the house's central chimney. The resemblance to Rachel's description was uncanny. The Bible's family records identified her as Elizabeth Morrison, the same woman who had written the journal. The activity escalated as winter approached. Objects would move on their own, doors would open and close without explanation, and the house would fill with the scent of wood smoke, even when the fireplace was cold. But it was the chimney that seemed to be the focus of the paranormal activity. Sometimes late at night, we'd hear what sounded like somebody climbing inside it, accompanied by a woman's voice calling out names we didn't recognize. Nathan decided to investigate the chimney more thoroughly. Using modern imaging equipment borrowed from his construction company, he discovered an anomaly: a small sealed chamber built into the chimney's base. After careful consideration, we decided to open it. Inside, we found a collection of objects that seemed deliberately placed. A child's shoe, a handful of dried herbs, several small bones, and a tin-type photograph of two young children. The back of the photograph bore their names, Thomas and Mary Morrison, aged 8 and 6, and the date 1874. That night, the house erupted in activity. The temperature dropped so dramatically that our breath frosted in the air. Objects flew across rooms, doors slammed throughout the house, and the sound of children's laughter echoed through the halls. In Rachel's room, we found her sitting calmly on her bed, talking to thin air. "The sad lady isn't sad anymore," she told us. She found her babies. Further research at the local historical society revealed the tragic story. Elizabeth Morrison's 2 children had disappeared during the harsh winter of 1874. Their bodies were never found, but local legend suggested they had tried to climb up the chimney, perhaps playing a game and become trapped. Elizabeth had turned to folk magic in her grief, believing she could open a doorway between worlds to bring her children back. The journal we found detailed her increasingly desperate attempts to contact them. She died in 1875, still searching for her lost children. After our discovery, the violent activity ceased, but the house didn't become empty. Sometimes we'd hear children playing in the attic, their laughter muffled but distinct. Rachel would sometimes speak of playing with Thomas and Mary, describing games that hadn't been played in over a century. The most remarkable incident occurred during the first major snowstorm of winter. Rachel was looking out her window at the swirling snow when she called us excitedly. There in the fresh snow were footprints, 2 sets of small barefoot prints and 1 set of adult prints, all walking away from the house before fading into nothing. We still live in the Morrison farm, sharing our space with its original inhabitants. The children's laughter has become as familiar as the creaking of old floorboards, and occasionally we'll find Elizabeth's journal has moved to a new location, as if she's still checking on her precious record of love and loss. Every winter, we leave small gifts by the chimney, wooden toys, candy sticks, and other things that children from any era might enjoy. They always disappear by morning, and sometimes we find thank you notes written in an antique hand. Your kindness warms our hearts, though they have long ceased to beat. Some might find it strange, sharing a home with spirits, but we've come to understand that houses like ours are more than just buildings. They're keepers of stories, holders of memories, and sometimes places where love transcends even the boundary between life and death. In our small Michigan town, where everyone knew everyone else's business, my brother Jacob's strange phone calls became something of a local legend. It started during his sophomore year of high school, when the nights grew long and the autumn winds whispered through the bare branches of our maple trees. The first call came at 2:30 in the morning. Jacob's ringtone, some generic pop song, pierced the quiet of our old farmhouse. In his groggy state, he answered without checking the caller ID. What he heard wasn't a voice, but rather a sound that he would later describe as static mixed with screams. A cacophony of white noise interwoven with what seemed like distant human voices in agony. Initially, we all assumed it was a prank. Our parents, Thomas and Mary, suggested blocking the number, but when Jacob tried to trace it, he found himself connected to an elderly man living 3 counties away, who had no idea what he was talking about. The calls continued, always between 2 and 3 in the morning, always with that same horrifying soundtrack of static and screams. I remember one particular night when Jacob burst into my room, his face pale in the moonlight. He thrust his phone at me, the screen showing an incoming call from a number we'd never seen before. With trembling fingers, I pressed the speaker button. The sound that emerged from the tiny speaker made my blood run cold. Beneath the crackling static, I could hear what sounded like hundreds of voices whispering in unison, their words just beyond comprehension. Jacob changed his number after a month of these calls. He switched to a different carrier, got a new phone, even changed his plan entirely. For a week, blessed silence reigned in our house. Then the calls started again, as if nothing had changed. The same time, the same sounds, but now from numbers that, when traced, led to disconnected lines or confused strangers. Our parents began to worry in earnest. They took Jacob to doctors, thinking perhaps he was experiencing some form of auditory hallucination. But I had heard the calls myself, and so had our mother one night when she answered Jacob's phone while he was in the shower. The sound had made her drop the phone as if it had burned her. Things escalated when Jacob lost his phone during a school field trip. That night at exactly 2:45, our home phone rang. Mom answered it, expecting it to be Jacob calling from a friend's phone. Instead, that familiar static and screams filled our kitchen. When she tried to 69 the number, the automated system said the number was disconnected. The calls continued to our home phone for several weeks, creating a nightly ritual of dread in our household. We'd all sit in the living room, watching the clock inch toward the witching hour, knowing that somewhere between 2 and 3, our phone would ring with its message from whatever darkness had fixated on our family. Then Jacob lost his job at the local grocery store, and with it, his ability to pay for a new phone. The calls to our home phone stopped abruptly, as if whatever was calling knew he could no longer be reached. We breathed a collective sigh of relief, thinking perhaps the nightmare was over. But one night, Mom asked me to listen to a voicemail she'd received on her cell phone. My hands shook as I held her phone to my ear. There it was again, that distinctive static, those distant screams, now preserved in digital form on our mother's voicemail. When we tried to trace that number, the automated system simply said, "This number does not exist." We never discovered the source of the calls. No amount of technological investigation or spiritual intervention seemed to provide answers. The calls eventually stopped as mysteriously as they had begun, leaving us with questions that still haunt our family gatherings. Jacob graduated high school and went to college out of state, but he still keeps his phone on silent between 2 and 3 in the morning, just in case. Sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in my room, I'll hear my phone buzz with an incoming call. My heart stops for a moment as I check the number, half expecting to see one of those mysterious combinations of digits that brought such terror into our lives. So far, it's always been normal calls from normal people. But part of me wonders if whatever was trying to reach us through those static-filled channels is still out there, searching for a new way to make contact. The experience changed our family in subtle ways. We became more protective of each other, more aware of the thin line between the world we know and whatever lies beyond it. Jacob rarely talks about those months of mysterious calls, but I've noticed he never sleeps with his phone in his room anymore. And sometimes, when a call drops or static interrupts a conversation, I catch him looking over his shoulder, as if expecting to see something standing there, finally ready to reveal what those screaming voices were trying to tell us all along. The Prescott House in Newport stood as a testament to Rhode Island's colonial heritage. Its weathered shingles and salt-stained windows, having witnessed nearly 3 centuries of history. When I inherited it from my grandmother, I knew I was getting more than just a historic home. I was becoming the keeper of family memories, both seen and unseen. The first indication that I shared my new home with an unusual resident came shortly after I moved in with my Russian blue cat, Silver. He would often stop in the middle of a room, his green eyes tracking something invisible as it moved across the floor. At first, I dismissed it as typical cat behavior, but then I started feeling it too, that unmistakable sensation of something brushing against my legs, the weight of a cat jumping onto my bed at night. The thing was, whenever I felt these phantom touches, Silver was nowhere nearby. In fact, he seemed to interact with whatever it was, playing chase through the hallways with an invisible companion, or staring intently at a specific spot on my bed where the covers would inexplicably indent, as if an unseen cat had made itself comfortable. One stormy night, I woke to the sound of purring. Silver was asleep in the living room. I could see him through my open bedroom door, but the purring came from right next to my pillow. In the dim light from my window, I watched as my covers shifted and felt the distinctive pressure of paws kneading the blanket beside me. Research into the house's history revealed that my grandmother had owned a black cat named Shadow, who had been particularly attached to the house. When developers had threatened to tear down the property in the 1970s, witnesses claimed to have seen a black cat appearing in windows and on the porch, even though Shadow had passed away years before. The developers experienced so many unexplained accidents and equipment failures that they eventually abandoned the project. Now, decades later, I often catch glimpses of a black tail disappearing around corners, hear phantom paws padding across hardwood floors, or find my grandmother's old rocking chair swaying gently, as if a ghostly cat had just jumped down from its favorite perch. Silver seems to have accepted his supernatural housemate, and sometimes I wake to find him playing what appears to be an ethereal game of chase with his invisible friend. I've come to understand that some guardians never abandon their posts, even after death. Shadow still protects our family home, and on quiet nights, when the moon casts long shadows through the windows, I swear I can hear 2 cats purring contentedly in the darkness. Massachusetts General Hospital's intensive care unit operates 24 hours a day, its rhythms marked by the steady beeping of monitors and the quiet footsteps of night shift nurses. I've worked here for 15 years, but nothing in my medical training prepared me for what happened during the winter of 2023. It started with Michael Forrest, a 32-year-old trauma patient who had been in a catastrophic car accident. He lay comatose in bed 3, surrounded by the usual array of life support equipment. During my night shifts, I began noticing something unusual. His vital signs would suddenly improve for brief periods, coinciding with the appearance of an elderly woman in a nurse's uniform I didn't recognize. At first, I assumed she was from another department, though her uniform seemed oddly outdated, reminiscent of the 1950s. She would stand by Michael's bed, checking his vitals with practiced efficiency, sometimes humming quietly as she worked. But whenever I approached to speak with her, she would be gone, leaving only the lingering scent of lavender powder and alcohol swabs. Other staff members began reporting similar sightings. The night janitor claimed to have seen her walking through closed doors. A resident doctor mentioned that she had helped him locate emergency supplies during a crisis, only to disappear before he could thank her. Always, her appearances coincided with inexplicable improvements in patient conditions. Curious, I began researching the hospital's history. In the archives, I found a photograph from 1954 showing the ICU's original nursing staff. There she was, Margaret Sullivan, head nurse of the intensive care unit for over 30 years. According to hospital records, she had worked every night shift available, dedicating her life to caring for the most critical patients. She died in 1982, but the photograph captured her kind eyes and determined expression perfectly. One particularly difficult night, Michael crashed. As we rushed to resuscitate him, I caught a glimpse of Margaret standing at the foot of his bed, her hands clasped as if in prayer. The room filled with the scent of lavender, and somehow I knew exactly which medications to administer, which procedures to perform. Michael stabilized, and when I looked up to thank her, she smiled and faded away. Michael recovered and was eventually discharged, though he never remembered the elderly nurse who had helped save his life. But we still see her sometimes, especially during the quietest hours of night shift, still making her rounds, still caring for her patients, even after death. In a way, it's comforting to know that some healers never truly leave their posts. The Baker family's Victorian mansion in Princeton seemed like a dream come true. 4 stories of 19th century craftsmanship, complete with turrets, gables, and a wraparound porch. John and Megan had spent years looking for the perfect historic home to restore, and with their children growing, the timing seemed perfect. But old houses hold secrets, and some residents never truly leave. The peculiarities began during renovation. Workers reported tools disappearing, only to reappear in different rooms. The electrician swore he heard children laughing in empty rooms. Most notably, the wallpaper in the nursery. A faded pattern of carousel horses would repair itself overnight after being stripped, appearing fresh and vibrant each morning, despite our efforts to remove it. Their daughter Alice, age 8, was the first to meet Elizabeth. "She's lonely," Alice explained matter-of-factly over breakfast one morning. "She says her parents won't let her leave her room because she's sick, but she feels better when we play together." When asked who Elizabeth was, Alice pointed to a portrait in the hallway, a solemn-faced girl in a white dress, painted in 1875. Research at the Historical Society revealed that Elizabeth Hamilton had died of tuberculosis in that very nursery. Her parents, driven mad with grief, had sealed the room afterward, leaving everything exactly as it had been on the day she died. The carousel wallpaper had been Elizabeth's final birthday gift. As months passed, Elizabeth's presence became more pronounced. The sound of a music box would drift through the house late at night, playing a tinkling version of Beautiful Dreamer. Small footprints would appear in the dust during renovations. Most remarkably, Alice's toys would arrange themselves in elaborate tea parties, complete with half-eaten ghostly cookies that would vanish if adults looked too closely. The activity centered around the nursery, where the carousel wallpaper now seemed to move in the moonlight, painted horses galloping across the walls, while phantom calliope music played softly in the background. Alice spent hours there, engaged in animated conversations with her invisible friend, teaching Elizabeth about modern toys and learning Victorian children's games in return. One day, Megan found an old diary wedged behind a loose baseboard. Its pages contained Elizabeth's thoughts during her final months, revealing a lonely child who dreamed of riding real carousel horses and playing with other children. The last entry, written in a shaky hand, expressed her wish to stay in the nursery forever. Where the horses on the wall can carry me away to adventures I'll never have. Rather than fear their ghostly resident, the Bakers embraced her. They restored the nursery to its original splendor, complete with period toys and furniture. Elizabeth showed her gratitude in subtle ways, protecting the house from burglars, warning the family of a gas leak, by repeatedly playing her music box until someone investigated, even helping Alice with her history homework by acting out scenes from the past. Now, years later, visitors to the Baker mansion often report seeing two young girls playing in the nursery window. One modern, one in Victorian dress, both laughing as they ride imaginary carousel horses across the walls. The house has become a perfect blend of past and present, proving that sometimes the best families are those that bridge the gap between this world and the next. The Pioneer Trust Building stands as one of Portland's oldest office structures. Its red brick facade and copper-green dome, a testament to the city's early 20th century prosperity. As the night janitor, Maria Garcia knows every creaking floorboard and temperamental radiator. But she also knows there's someone else working the night shift, someone who technically hasn't been employed there for over 50 years. It started with the whistling. Every night around 11, when the last executives had long since departed, Maria would hear a cheerful tune echoing through the empty corridors. The melody was always the same, "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," whistled with professional precision. The building manager, David Wilson, initially dismissed her reports. "Old buildings make noise," he'd say, not looking up from his computer. But then the security cameras began catching strange images. Doors opening for invisible visitors, elevators moving between floors with no passengers, and most remarkably, papers being sorted and filed in locked offices. Curious about these ghostly activities, Maria began researching the building's history. In the city archives, she found photographs of the original office staff from 1955. One image showed a dapper gentleman named Franklin Pierce, the head accountant, known for his perpetual whistling and dedication to the Portland Beavers baseball team. According to newspaper records, Franklin had worked late one night during tax season, suffered a heart attack at his desk, and wasn't found until the next morning. His last known action had been completing and filing his client's tax returns, even as his health failed. The ghostly activity always intensified during tax season. Modern accountants would arrive in the morning to find their paperwork mysteriously organized, complex calculations corrected, and occasionally notes in elegant cursive pointing out overlooked deductions. The corrections were always accurate. One particularly busy April night, Maria was cleaning the 44th floor when she heard the familiar whistling. Instead of hurrying away as usual, she spoke. "Thank you for helping them, Mr. Pierce." The whistling stopped, and she felt a gentle pat on her shoulder. The air filled with the scent of pipe tobacco and old paper. Since then, Maria and Franklin have developed an unusual friendship. She keeps him company during his nightly rounds, and he helps her practice English while she teaches him Spanish. Sometimes they discuss baseball, though he still can't quite grasp the concept of designated hitters. The other cleaning staff avoid the building at night, but Maria has come to appreciate her supernatural colleague. After all, she reasons, in a world of corporate takeovers and digital automation, there's something comforting about an accountant so dedicated to his work that not even death could make him miss a tax deadline. The Turner family thought they'd found their dream home in Charleston's historic district, a pre-Revolutionary War mansion with high ceilings, heart pine floors, and a history as rich as the city itself. Built in 1745, the house had survived earthquakes, fires, and civil war. But some dangers are more insidious than natural disasters. Adam and Grace Turner moved in with their children during a sweltering August heat wave. The previous owners had sold the property at a surprisingly low price, making vague references to family circumstances, requiring a quick sale. The Turners, caught up in the excitement of owning a piece of American history, didn't press for details. The first warning came from their daughter Emily's night terrors. She would wake screaming about a man in old-fashioned clothes who stood in the corners of her room, watching her with hollow eyes. Their son Michael started sleepwalking, always trying to reach the sealed door in the basement that led to what historical records called the punishment room. Grace began finding strange objects in the walls during renovation, bottles filled with murky liquid, bundles of herbs tied with human hair, and small animal bones arranged in peculiar patterns. Behind the kitchen hearth, they discovered a leather-bound journal dated 1768. Its pages filled with disturbing accounts of the house's original owner, a wealthy merchant with an interest in the darker aspects of Caribbean mysticism. The activity escalated rapidly. Shadows moved against the laws of light and physics. Voices whispered in archaic English from empty rooms. The children's toys would arrange themselves in circles overnight, always pointing toward the sealed basement door. Most disturbingly, they began finding messages scratched into the wood panels. "Release us, and the debt must be paid." Research at the Historical Society revealed the house's dark secret. The merchant had used his wealth and position to hide horrific practices, human sacrifices disguised as slave deaths, ritual ceremonies in the basement room, deals struck with forces better left undisturbed. When authorities finally investigated in 1770, they found evidence of dozens of murders, but the merchant had vanished, leaving only a note promising to return and collect what was owed. The haunting turned violent during the harvest moon. Objects flew across rooms with devastating force. Invisible hands left bruises on the children's arms. Grace would wake to find her blankets soaked with seawater, despite being miles from the harbor. The sealed door in the basement began to crack open on its own, revealing glimpses of something that moved in the darkness beyond. The final straw came when Michael, still sleepwalking, almost reached the basement door one night. In his trance, he spoke in a voice that wasn't his own, reciting phrases in a language that made the air itself feel thick and greasy. When they finally woke him, he had no memory of the incident but bore strange symbols carved into his palms. An expert in colonial-era occult practices warned them that the house wasn't just haunted. It was a focal point for something far more dangerous. The merchant's rituals had created a sort of spiritual debt, and the house itself had become a gateway waiting to be reopened. Each family that lived there was drawn into this dark legacy, their energy feeding whatever waited behind that basement door. The Turners fled the house that night, leaving everything behind. Their experience added another chapter to the property's dark history. It still stands empty, its windows dark except for occasional glimpses of movement in the upper floors. Real estate agents refuse to list it, and preservation societies pretend it doesn't exist. But sometimes, late at night, passers-by report seeing lights in the basement windows and hearing what sounds like chanting in an ancient tongue. The sealed door, they say, grows a little weaker each year, while something patient and hungry waits behind it, knowing that eventually someone else will be drawn to the beautiful old house with the surprisingly affordable price tag. Our farmhouse in rural Virginia came with 6 acres of overgrown gardens, a Victorian greenhouse thick with ivy, and as we soon discovered, an unexpected resident. Rebecca and I had moved there seeking escape from Washington, D.C.'s frenetic pace, drawn to the property's air of gentle decay and forgotten grandeur. We first glimpsed her on a misty spring morning, a small figure in a blue dress, standing among the neglected roses. I assumed she was a neighbor's child until she turned slightly, revealing clothes that belonged in a previous century. When I blinked, she was gone, leaving only an impression of profound sadness. Rebecca saw her next, while restoring the greenhouse. The glass panes had suddenly frosted over, despite the warm weather, and there in the condensation appeared a child's drawing of a family mother, father, and a little girl in a distinctive blue dress. Before Rebecca could take a photo, the image melted away. The local historical society provided our first clues. The property had belonged to the Montgomery family in the 1870s. Their daughter, Clara, had been known for her love of the gardens, especially the roses her father imported from England. She died of diphtheria in 1876, just shy of her 10th birthday. Clara seemed particularly active in the greenhouse and gardens. You would find fresh flowers arranged in antique patterns, though the gardens had long since grown wild. Delicate footprints would appear in the morning dew, leading from the greenhouse to the rose bushes and back. Sometimes, late at night, we'd hear humming from the garden, an old lullaby that our research identified as popular in the 1870s. Most remarkably, the plants Clara visited thrived. Roses that hadn't bloomed in decades suddenly produced flowers in forgotten varieties. Shrubs shaped themselves into the formal patterns shown, in old photographs of the garden. Even in winter, certain flower beds remained mysteriously frost-free. One afternoon, while clearing ivy from the greenhouse, I discovered a small diary wedged behind a loose brick. The pages, written in a child's careful hand, revealed Clara's deep connection to the garden. She wrote about helping her father tend the roses, learning the language of flowers from her mother, and her dream of becoming a botanist. An unusual ambition for a girl in that era. The final entry, dated just before her death, expressed her wish to stay in the garden forever. If God takes me, I should like to become like the roses, returning each spring to bring beauty and joy. It seems Clara got her wish. We often sense her presence while gardening, a small hand guiding us to prune here or plant there, sharing knowledge accumulated over a century and a half of watching the seasons turn. The gardens have flourished under her ghostly supervision, returning to their former glory. We've learned to watch for signs of her approval or concern. If we're about to make a mistake in the garden, tools will mysteriously move or plants will suddenly appear wilted until we correct our course. She seems especially protective of the heritage roses, some of which, we've discovered, are varieties thought to be extinct. Last spring, we found an old photograph album in the attic. Among the formal family portraits was a candid image of Clara in her beloved garden, wearing the blue dress we'd come to know so well. She was kneeling beside a rose bush, her face bright with joy as she tended to her flowers. We had the photograph restored and hung it in the greenhouse. The next morning, fresh roses had been arranged beneath it, varieties that hadn't bloomed in over a century, their petals still sparkling with otherworldly dew. Now, when visitors admire our historic gardens, we simply smile and credit our traditional gardening methods. After all, who better to maintain a Victorian garden than a Victorian gardener? Clara remains our silent partner in preservation, proving that some passions transcend even death. Darkwood College for Women has stood on its New England hilltop since 1832. Its Gothic spires and ivy-covered walls housing generations of ambitious young women. As a freshman, I was assigned to Blackwell Hall, the oldest dormitory on campus. My roommate Chloe Winters and I soon discovered we weren't the only residents of room 317. The first signs were subtle books rearranging themselves on shelves, the smell of old perfume lingering in empty rooms, the sound of a scratching pen when both of us were in bed. Then came the mathematics. We'd wake to find complex equations solved on our whiteboards, the handwriting delicate and antiquated, the methods unlike anything taught in modern classrooms. Our research in the college archives revealed that in 1878, a brilliant mathematics student named Catherine Blackwell had lived in our room. Despite being the most promising mathematician of her generation, she was denied a professorship solely because of her gender. She died under mysterious circumstances just before graduation. Her groundbreaking thesis on non-Euclidean geometry lost to time. Catherine's presence became more pronounced during exam periods. She seemed particularly drawn to my advanced calculus textbooks, leaving elegant proofs and annotations in the margins. Sometimes we'd find 19th century mathematical journals materialized on our desks, open to passages relevant to our studies. One night, struggling with a particularly difficult theorem, I felt a cold presence over my shoulder. The pencil in my hand suddenly moved with purpose, guided by invisible fingers. The solution that emerged was beautiful in its complexity, combining modern methods with techniques that hadn't been used in over a century. Chloe, a history major, became fascinated by Catherine's story. She discovered that despite the official records, Catherine hadn't simply died. She had taken her own life after her thesis was rejected and credited to a male colleague. Her last words, found scrawled in her diary, expressed her wish to stay until women received the recognition they deserved in mathematics. We began leaving mathematical challenges for her complex equations written on the whiteboard before bed. By morning, they would be solved, often with multiple solutions and explanatory notes that demonstrated mathematical concepts decades ahead of their time. Other female students in advanced mathematics started visiting our room for late-night study sessions, and Catherine seemed to delight in helping them understand particularly challenging concepts. The most remarkable incident occurred during my senior thesis defense. As I explained my work on a theoretical framework that built upon principles similar to Catherine's lost thesis, the air in the conference room grew cold. My advisors watched in amazement as additional equations appeared on the blackboard behind me, expanding and perfecting my proofs in elegant 19th century script. Rather than fear our mathematical ghost, we came to see her as a mentor and ally. Catherine had found her own way to teach, transcending both death and the gender barriers of her time. Now, when new students remark on the unusually high number of women mathematicians who have graduated from Darkwood College, we simply smile and credit our traditional teaching methods. Before graduation, Chloe and I left a gift for Catherine, a modern mathematics textbook with a special note thanking her for her guidance and acknowledging her as a pioneer in her field. The next morning, we found a pressed flower in the book and written in faded ink on the flyleaf, "Knowledge, like truth, belongs to no one gender. Share it freely." Room 317 remains the most requested room in Blackwell Hall, especially among mathematics majors. They say that if you're struggling with a particularly difficult problem late at night, you might feel a gentle hand on your shoulder and catch the faint scent of lavender ink. And if you listen carefully, you might hear the scratching of a pen, still working through theorems that bridge the gap between past and present. The Pierce family's Victorian mansion in Providence's historic district seemed perfect. 4 stories of architectural splendor, complete with widow's walk and copper-roofed turrets. Jonathan and Sophia saw past the peeling wallpaper and creaking floors, envisioning a restored masterpiece. But some houses resist renovation, preferring to keep their secrets buried in the walls. The trouble began during demolition. Workers uncovered strange symbols carved into the support beams, and bottles containing unidentifiable substances sealed into the walls. Behind the library's oak paneling, they found a journal dating to 1868. Its pages filled with disturbing accounts of occult experiments conducted by the original owner, Augustus Whitmore. Their children were the first to notice something was wrong. 10-year-old Marcus started sleepwalking, always trying to reach the sealed door in the library that led to what the blueprints labeled as a private study. 8-year-old Lucy began having conversations with someone she called the sad man, who she said wore old-fashioned clothes, and asked her to help him finish the work. The manifestations grew more dramatic. Books would fly off shelves, their pages flipping to passages about necromancy and spirit binding. The temperature in the library would drop to freezing, while the sealed door leaked a black substance that smelled of grave dirt. Most disturbing were the voices that echoed through the heating vents at night, speaking in dead languages and calling the children's names. Research revealed Whitmore's dark obsession. Grief-stricken after his family's death from scarlet fever, he had attempted to breach the barrier between life and death. His experiments grew increasingly desperate and twisted, involving rituals that the Historical Society's records only hinted at. He disappeared in 1870, leaving behind a letter warning that he had opened a door that cannot be closed. The haunting turned violent during the winter solstice. Invisible forces threw objects at the family. Strange symbols appeared carved into the children's headboards while they slept. The sealed door began to crack open on its own, revealing glimpses of a darkness that seemed to move with conscious malevolence. The final night in the house nearly cost them everything. They woke to find both children missing from their beds, sleepwalking toward the library. The sealed door stood open, revealing a hidden chamber whose walls were covered in occult symbols. In the center stood an altar, where Augustus Whitmore's desiccated corpse sat in a chair, surrounded by evidence of his final, failed ritual. As they rushed to grab the children, something emerged from the darkness behind the corpse. A writhing mass of shadows, with too many eyes and limbs that moved in impossible ways. They barely escaped, carrying the children out as the house seemed to try to hold them back, doors slamming and floors buckling beneath their feet. The Pierce family fled that night, leaving everything behind. The house still stands, its windows dark except for strange lights that sometimes flicker in the library. Various experts have attempted to cleanse the property, but none have succeeded. The sealed door remains open now, leading to a room that appears empty during the day, but fills with unspeakable horrors after sunset. Local legend says that on the winter solstice, you can see Augustus Whitmore standing at the library window, his corpse animated by whatever force he unleashed. He holds out his hands to passers-by, still seeking assistance for his desperate experiments, still trying to bridge the gap between life and death, unaware that he himself crossed that threshold over a century ago. The house remains unsold, its price dropping with each passing year. But some prices are too high, even when they seem like bargains. The door Augustus Whitmore opened remains open, and whatever lies beyond it waits patiently for the next family desperate enough or naive enough to think they can tame this particular piece of Providence's dark history. The Gardner family farm has stood in the same Vermont valley for 6 generations. Its white clapboard walls and red barn as much a part of the landscape as the maple trees and stone walls. I grew up there with my older sister Lindsay, our childhood marked by the rhythm of seasons and the comfort of familiar spaces. After Lindsay's death from leukemia at 23, I thought those comfortable rhythms were forever broken. I was wrong. The first sign that Lindsay hadn't completely left came during the maple sugaring season, her favorite time of year. I was alone in the sugar house, tending the evaporator when I heard her distinctive laugh, a sound I'd have known anywhere. The air filled with the scent of her favorite vanilla perfume, mixing with the sweet steam rising from the boiling sap. At first, I thought grief was playing tricks on my mind, but then small things began happening that couldn't be explained away. Her favorite coffee mug would be sitting on the porch railing in the morning, still warm to the touch. The old family recipes she'd been transcribing before her illness continued to fill themselves out in her handwriting. Her ancient pickup truck, which hadn't run since her death, would sometimes start itself on cold mornings, the engine turning over as if to warm up for chores she could no longer do. Mom and Dad noticed too, though we rarely spoke about it directly. They'd find her gardening tools arranged beside newly weeded flower beds, or discover her favorite songs playing on the old radio in the barn, even when it wasn't plugged in. The horses she'd loved would sometimes whinny a greeting to an empty stall, their ears pricked forward in the way they'd reserved just for her. Lindsay's presence was strongest during important moments. When Dad had his heart attack, the ambulance service swears they received a call from our landline, but no one was home to make it. During a particularly devastating storm, we woke to find all the animals had somehow been led into the barn before the worst hit, though all the doors had been locked. She seems especially active during the sugaring season. The sap runs better in the sections of wood she visits, and somehow the syrup never scorches when she's present in the sugar house. Sometimes we find messages written in the steam on the windows, simple things like "love you" or "check the north line," where we'd invariably find a broken sap line that needed repair. Last spring, I found her diary hidden in the sugar house rafters. The final entry, written just days before she passed, revealed that she'd asked God for extra time to watch over the farm and family she loved so much. "The doctors say I don't have long," she'd written, "but maybe time works differently for souls than it does for bodies." Now, when the steam rises from the sugar house on late winter evenings, I often sense her presence beside me. Sometimes I'll talk to her about my day, or ask her advice about running the farm. The answers come in subtle ways, a gentle nudge toward the right decision, a feeling of warmth when I'm on the right track, or that familiar laugh when I'm being particularly stubborn about something. We've learned to accept Lindsay's continued presence as part of the farm's natural rhythm. She's still doing what she always did, helping with chores, watching over the animals, and keeping an eye on the family she loved too much to completely leave. Some visitors are surprised by how comfortable we are with our family ghost, but as Dad says, she's still our Lindsay. She just has a different way of getting her chores done now. During the last sugaring of the season, as the sun sets behind the mountains and the steam rises like prayers from the sugar house, I sometimes catch a glimpse of her silhouette against the twilight. She's always moving, always working, still devoted to the land and family she watched over in life. And in those moments, I understand that some bonds, like the love between sisters, like the connection to family land, are stronger than death itself. St. Catherine's Children's Hospital stands as a testament to Victorian medical architecture. Its red brick walls and ornate cornices softened by decades of Minnesota winters. As a pediatric nurse, I've spent countless night shifts in the original wing, where modern medical equipment sits somewhat incongruously beneath carved wooden archways and stained glass windows. The night I first met her, I was checking on Lily Thompson, a 6-year-old leukemia patient. The girl had been unusually peaceful that evening, talking animatedly to thin air. When I asked who she was speaking to, Lily smiled. "The funny nurse," she said. "The one who wears the old-fashioned dress and tells stories about when the hospital was new." I might have dismissed it as a child's imagination, but then I noticed the antique rocking chair beside Lily's bed was moving slightly, though there was no draft in the room. The air carried a faint scent of carbolic acid, the disinfectant commonly used in the 19th century. Research in the hospital archives revealed that in 1882, a nurse named Eleanor Hayes had worked in the children's ward. Known for her storytelling abilities and gentle nature, she had continued working through a scarlet fever epidemic, eventually succumbing to the disease herself. Her last request was to be buried in her nurse's uniform, so the children would recognize me when I returned. Eleanor seems to have kept that promise. She appears most often to our sickest patients, particularly during the quiet hours of night shift. Children report a kind lady in an old-fashioned uniform who tells them stories about the hospital's early days and helps ease their pain. Parents often wake to find their children's fever has broken after Eleanor's visits, or difficult procedures have gone surprisingly well. Some of our youngest patients insist that Eleanor teaches them old-fashioned games and songs that haven't been played in over a century. We'll hear them singing rhymes that, when researched, turn out to be popular in Victorian nurseries. During the Christmas season, children who have never heard of them request traditional Victorian treats that Eleanor has described to them. The most remarkable incident occurred during a power outage when our backup generators failed. As we were preparing to evacuate our most critical patients, every oil lamp in the original wing lamps that hadn't been used in decades suddenly lit themselves. They burned steadily for the 6 hours it took to restore power, then extinguished themselves once the crisis had passed. Eleanor seems to have adapted to modern medicine in her own way. She's been known to alert staff to failing equipment or changes in patient conditions before our modern monitors detect them. Several times, nurses have found patient call buttons pressed in empty rooms, only to discover a critical need in a nearby room. We've learned to work around our Victorian colleague. When children talk about the funny nurse, we know to pay extra attention to what they tell us. Eleanor's presence has become as much a part of our treatment protocol as any modern medical procedure. After all, some forms of healing transcend time and technology. Recently, during a renovation project, workers discovered a cache of letters in a sealed wall cavity. They were written by Eleanor during the scarlet fever epidemic, describing her determination to stay with her patients even as her own health failed. The last letter, dated just days before her death, expressed her wish to continue caring for sick children, as long as there are little ones who need comfort in the night. Now, when I work night shift in the original wing, I sometimes catch glimpses of her in doorways, a tall figure in a Victorian nurse's uniform, making her eternal rounds. The children wave to her as she passes, and sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, you can hear her soft voice singing 19th century lullabies to our most restless patients. we've come to understand that some callings extend beyond death. Alina continues her rounds, offering a different kind of medicine, one that doesn't show up on charts or scans, but that brings its own kind of healing to the children in her care. The Liberty Medical Building in downtown Philadelphia bears little resemblance to the military hospital it once was during the Civil War. Its marble floors and modern offices mask the history of suffering and heroism that occurred within these walls. As the night security guard, I've learned that some of that history refuses to stay in the past. I first encountered Nurse Ruth during a routine patrol of the fourth floor, once the surgical ward, now home to investment firms and insurance offices. The smell of ether drifted through the hallway, though the building hadn't seen medical use in over a century. Then I saw her, a young woman in a Civil War-era nurse's uniform, carrying a lantern as she hurried past. At first, I thought she was part of some historical reenactment, but when she passed through a closed door without opening it, I realized I was dealing with something beyond normal explanation. Research revealed that Ruth Anderson had been one of the hospital's most dedicated nurses during the war, working tirelessly to save Union soldiers brought in from Gettysburg and other battles. Ruth's presence is most active during thunderstorms, which apparently remind her of artillery fire. She moves through the building checking on invisible patients, her lantern casting impossible shadows on the walls. Sometimes we hear her voice calling out for supplies or issuing medical orders to long-dead assistants. The most remarkable incidents occur when the building faces genuine emergencies. During a recent fire, several people reported being guided to safety by a young woman in 19th century dress who seemed to know every exit and hidden stairwell. When we checked the security footage, we saw doors opening on their own and lights appearing in the smoke to guide people to safety. Modern medical professionals who rent office space here often report strange experiences. Doctors speak of hearing a woman's voice correcting their diagnoses or suggesting alternative treatments. Suggestions that often prove surprisingly accurate when investigated. Several have mentioned finding antique medical textbooks open to relevant pages on their desks, though no such books exist in the building's current collection. Ruth seems particularly concerned with actual medical emergencies that occur in the building. When a visitor suffered a heart attack in the lobby, security cameras caught the image of a woman in a historical nurse's uniform performing modern CPR on him before the paramedics arrived. The doctors later said those first few minutes of intervention probably saved his life. The most detailed encounter came from a cleaning woman who speaks little English. She described meeting a kind nurse who taught her basic first aid skills through demonstration, despite their language barrier. The techniques she learned helped her save her grandson from choking a week later. We found evidence of Ruth's continued service in the hospital records from 1863 to 1865. She worked through the worst of the war, treating hundreds of soldiers with a level of care that was advanced for her time. She died during a typhoid outbreak in 1865, having contracted the disease from her patients. The building's owners have tried various methods to cleanse the property of its supernatural resident, but those of us who work here regularly have come to appreciate Ruth's continued dedication to her calling. She's not a malevolent presence. She's simply a nurse who never stopped making her rounds. During quiet nights, I often hear her footsteps in the empty hallways or catch the faint scent of her rose water perfume. Sometimes when I'm making my rounds, I sense her walking beside me, still watching over the building and its occupants. We've developed an understanding. Ruth and I, two guardians separated by time, but united in purpose. The modern security cameras occasionally catch glimpses of her. A figure in a historical uniform moving purposefully through the halls, her lantern light visible even in the infrared footage. She seems most active around 3 in the morning, the time when, according to hospital records, most of the surgical procedures took place during the war. Some of the office workers leave small offerings for her medical textbooks, Civil War-era photographs, or simply notes of thanks for her continued service. These items tend to disappear overnight, though they sometimes reappear in surprising places, often alongside helpful notes written in an elegant 19th century hand. Ruth's presence reminds us that some forms of service know no end. Even after more than a century and a half, she continues her rounds, adapting her calling to a changed world, but never abandoning her post. In a building where modern business has largely erased the traces of its medical past, she remains a gentle guardian whose dedication to healing transcends even death itself. The Point Harbor Lighthouse has stood sentinel on Maine's rocky coast since 1842. Its beam cutting through fog and darkness to guide ships safely past treacherous shoals. When my wife Emma and I took over as keepers, we knew we were inheriting more than just a job. We were becoming part of a tradition stretching back generations. What we didn't expect was that our predecessors would still be actively involved in the lighthouse's operation. The first hint came during a fierce nor'easter, when I was struggling to repair the fog horn. Through the howling wind, I heard a man's voice clearly say, "Check the auxiliary power coupling." Following the advice, I found the problem immediately. Later research revealed that William Cooper, the lighthouse's keeper from 1862 to 1891, had written extensively about maintaining the equipment during storms. He and his wife Margaret had served at Point Harbor for nearly 30 years, becoming legendary for their dedication to keeping the light burning through even the worst weather. The Coopers' presence became more apparent as winter approached. We'd find the brass fixtures polished to a mirror shine, though neither of us had cleaned them. During storms, mysterious footprints would appear in the tower, leading up to the lantern room. Most remarkably, on nights when fog rolled in particularly thick, we'd hear the clear voices of a man and woman singing hymns, something the Coopers were known to do during their watches. The most dramatic incident occurred during a December gale that knocked out our modern electrical system. As we struggled to switch to the backup generator, the ancient oil lamp mechanism, which hadn't been used in decades, suddenly lit itself. The flame burned steady and bright through the night, guiding 3 fishing boats to safety. William seems particularly concerned with maintaining the lighthouse's equipment. Tools will mysteriously move to where they're needed most, and maintenance logs occasionally fill themselves out in an elegant 19th century hand. Margaret, meanwhile, tends to the domestic side of lighthouse keeping. We often find fresh-baked bread in the kitchen, made from her recipe that won blue ribbons at county fairs in the 1870s. Their presence is strongest during storms. We'll hear William's boots on the tower stairs as he makes his rounds, or catch glimpses of Margaret in the kitchen, preparing hot drinks for imaginary shipwrecked sailors. The logbook sometimes contains entries in their handwriting, warning of dangerous weather conditions or noting ships in distress. Warnings that invariably prove accurate. The Coopers take particular interest in teaching us the old ways of lighthouse keeping. Books about traditional methods appear on our desks, opened to relevant pages. During one particularly difficult repair, I found myself guided by unseen hands, showing me techniques that hadn't been used in over a century, but proved perfectly suited to the task. We've learned that the Coopers died within days of each other in 1891, after successfully guiding a passenger steamer through one of the worst storms in Point Harbor's history. Their final log entry expressed their wish to remain at our post as long as ships need safe passage through these waters. It seems they've kept that promise. Modern captains sometimes report seeing two figures in 19th century dress standing at the tower's railing during storms, or hearing a woman's voice over the radio providing detailed navigation advice in antiquated nautical terms. The Coast Guard has never been able to trace these transmissions. We've come to appreciate our ghostly predecessors' continued dedication. During fierce storms, when modern technology struggles against nature's fury, it's comforting to know we have experienced helpers on our side. The Coopers represent the best traditions of lighthouse keeping. The unwavering commitment to saving lives, the attention to detail, and the understanding that some duties transcend even death. Now, when visitors ask about the lighthouse's history, we tell them that Point Harbor has been continuously staffed since 1842. We just don't mention that some of our staff have been here considerably longer than others. After all, in a profession dedicated to helping others find their way home, it seems fitting that some choose to make that dedication eternal. The Little Acorns Daycare Center occupies a stately Victorian mansion in New Haven's historic district. Its bright yellow paint and cheerful playground equipment mask a darker history that owner Rachel Morgan discovered shortly after opening. The house had once belonged to the Crane family, whose tragic story still echoes through its halls. The first signs appeared during renovation. Workers reported tools moving on their own, and the sound of children's laughter in empty rooms. Most disturbing were the crayon drawings that would appear on freshly painted walls. Always the same scene of a woman in Victorian dress, standing beside three small figures. The incidents escalated after the daycare opened. Children spoke of playing with kids who weren't there, and taking cookies from a sad lady in old-fashioned clothes. Toys would arrange themselves in Victorian patterns overnight, and the old piano in the front parlor would play lullabies during nap time, though no one was at the keys. Research revealed that Elizabeth Crane had run a small boarding school for children in the house during the 1870s. She was known for her progressive teaching methods and devotion to her students. But tragedy struck when diphtheria swept through New Haven, claiming Elizabeth and three of her youngest pupils. The children seemed to sense Elizabeth's presence more strongly than adults. They often draw pictures of her, a tall woman in a long black dress with a high collar, exactly matching photographs from the Historical Society. Some children claim she helps them with their letters and numbers, teaching in an old-fashioned way that, when researched, matches educational methods from the 1870s. Elizabeth appears most active during story time and music sessions. The rocking chair in the reading corner often moves on its own, keeping time to the stories. Children report that Elizabeth teaches them songs they've never heard before, Victorian nursery rhymes and educational songs that haven't been sung in over a century. The most remarkable incident occurred during a fire drill. As the teachers were counting heads outside, they realized one child was missing. Rachel rushed back inside to find 3-year-old Emma walking calmly down the stairs, held firmly by an invisible hand. Emma later said the school lady had woken her from her nap and helped her outside when she heard the alarm. Strange items began appearing in the house: slate pencils, copybooks, and other Victorian school supplies that weren't there before. Most notably, they found Elizabeth's original teaching journal hidden in a wall cavity, its pages filled with loving observations about her students and innovative teaching methods that were far ahead of their time. The children have developed their own rituals around Elizabeth's presence. They leave drawings for her before nap time and insist on setting an extra place at snack time for the school lady. Sometimes they report that Elizabeth tells them stories about what school was like in her day, describing details about Victorian childhood that even their teachers don't know. Not all the manifestations are peaceful. During the anniversary of the diphtheria outbreak, the house fills with the sound of coughing and crying. Elizabeth appears more frequently, trying to comfort invisible children. The modern children seem unusually subdued during these periods, often gathering in quiet groups to sing the old songs Elizabeth taught them. Rachel considered closing the daycare after particularly intense paranormal episodes, but the children's attachment to Elizabeth made her reconsider. Instead, she's incorporated aspects of Victorian education into the curriculum: slate boards for practicing letters, traditional circle games, and even some of Elizabeth's teaching methods found in her journal. The local historical society has become interested in the daycare's unique blend of past and present. They've documented several historically accurate Victorian games and songs that the children couldn't have learned from any living person. Some researchers suggest that Elizabeth is continuing her life's work, adapting her methods for a new generation of students. Parents have come to accept their children's invisible teacher. When kids come home singing centuries-old nursery rhymes or demonstrating Victorian manners, they just smile and add it to the unique education their children receive at Little Acorns. After all, how many daycares can boast of having a Victorian schoolmistress on their permanent staff? Elizabeth remains a gentle presence, still devoted to educating young children even after death. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before nap time, visitors catch glimpses of her moving through the rooms, straightening paintings and patting heads with invisible hands. The children wave to her as she passes, accepting her presence as naturally as they accept their living teachers. As Rachel often says, some teachers never stop teaching, and some schools never stop nurturing children, even long after the final bell has rung. The Majestic Theater in Baltimore has hosted performances since 1885. Its gilt-edged stage graced by some of the greatest names in American theater. But its most dedicated performer never took a final bow. Vivian Sterling, the celebrated actress who died during a performance of Romeo and Juliet in 1923, still appears for certain special productions. I first encountered Vivian during rehearsals for my role as Juliet, the same role she was playing when she died. The theater was empty except for me and the ghost light, but I could hear someone whispering my lines just before I spoke them. The words carried on the musty air with perfect dramatic timing. Other actors reported similar experiences. Costume pieces rearranging themselves to be more historically accurate, props moving to more dramatically appropriate positions, and the distinct sound of 19th century applause during particularly well-performed scenes. Research into Vivian's career revealed her dedication to historical accuracy and dramatic authenticity. She was known for extensively researching her roles, often incorporating gestures and movements documented from the time periods of various plays. Her final performance as Juliet was said to be her most historically accurate interpretation ever. Vivian seems most active during Shakespeare productions, particularly those she performed in life. Actors report receiving notes written in elegant script, offering suggestions about pronunciation or movement that prove to be historically accurate when researched. The theater's archive contains many of Vivian's original performance notes, and the suggestions match her documented methods perfectly. The most dramatic manifestation occurred during a performance of Hamlet. The actor playing Ophelia fell ill just before her mad scene, but the understudy was stuck in traffic. As the stage manager panicked, a figure in a 19th century costume stepped out of the shadows and performed the scene flawlessly, exactly as Vivian Sterling had been famous for doing. By the time the scene ended, the understudy had arrived, finding the audience in tears from the powerful performance they couldn't explain. Vivian's presence extends beyond performances. She's known to arrange the ghost light properly each night, a tradition she started in life. During renovations, workers would find her notes about the theater's original configuration hidden in walls or under floorboards, helping restore the space to its historic glory. She takes particular interest in young actresses tackling classical roles. Many report dreams of being coached by a woman in Victorian dress, learning techniques and interpretations that prove remarkably effective. Some have found their scripts annotated overnight in faded ink, the notes matching Vivian's handwriting from the theater's archives. The night before my opening performance as Juliet, I stayed late to practice the death scene, the same scene during which Vivian had her fatal heart attack. As I lay on the tomb prop, I felt a gentle hand adjust my position. A voice whispered, "Let the grief flow through your whole body, dear." The Italians believed the heart could actually break from sorrow. That night, I gave the performance of my life, incorporating subtle gestures and movements that felt strangely natural, though I'd never practiced them. Later, reviewing historical photographs of Vivian's performances, I recognized those same gestures, a way of expressing emotion that had been lost to time until she chose to share it again. The theater's management has learned to work around their permanent resident actor. They always leave a seat empty in the Royal Box, Vivian's preferred viewing spot in life. and maintain many of her theatrical superstitions. The ghost light is positioned exactly as she preferred, and her dressing room remains unchanged, though it's now used as a small theatrical museum. Modern productions benefit from her century of theatrical experience. Directors have learned to listen when props mysteriously move or costumes rearrange themselves. Vivian's suggestions invariably improve the dramatic impact. Some claim to hear her giving notes during dress rehearsals. Her critique always aimed at achieving greater authenticity and emotional truth. Vivian's continued presence has made the Majestic unique among historic theaters. While other venues claim theatrical ghosts, ours actively contributes to productions, maintaining traditions and techniques that might otherwise be lost. She represents the dedication that great theater requires, a commitment so deep that not even death can end the performance. Now, before each opening night, the cast gathers on stage to invite Vivian to watch over the production. The ghost light dims briefly in response, and sometimes, if you listen carefully, you can hear the rustle of a Victorian dress as she takes her place in the royal box, ready to ensure that the show goes on just as it has for over a century. The O'Connor Dairy Farm has been operating in the same Wisconsin Valley since 1872. Its red barn and white farmhouse, a familiar sight to generations of local families. When I inherited the farm from my father, I also inherited its more unusual residents, the spirits of farmers past who still help with the daily chores. It started with the morning milking. I'd enter the barn to find the cows already gathered, though no one had brought them in. Equipment would be cleaned and ready, and sometimes I'd hear the rhythmic sound of hand milking, though we'd switched to machines decades ago. My daughter Caitlin was the first to identify our helper. "That's great-grandpa Patrick," she said matter-of-factly one morning, pointing to an empty space near the milk separator. "He says you're not cleaning the equipment exactly right." When I adjusted my cleaning routine to match my grandfather's old methods, the milk's quality noticeably improved. Research into the farm's logs showed that Patrick O'Connor had been known for his meticulous attention to dairy hygiene, unusual for the 19th century. He developed special cleaning techniques that had kept his herd healthy through several disease outbreaks that devastated neighboring farms. The assistance isn't limited to the milking parlor. During planting season, we often find the old heavy horse's tack laid out, though we've used tractors for generations. Sometimes we hear the horse's hooves and the jingle of harness bells, followed by the sound of Patrick's voice calling commands in Gaelic. The most remarkable help comes during storms. Somehow, the animals are always safely in the barn before severe weather hits, even if we haven't had time to bring them in. During one particularly bad blizzard, we found hay and water had been distributed to all the stalls, though no one could have reached the barn through the snow. Patrick seems particularly concerned with maintaining traditional farming methods alongside modern ones. Old tools will appear in convenient places, often proving useful when modern equipment fails. His presence is strongest during the changing of seasons, when he ensures age-old farming traditions are properly observed. The farm's ledgers occasionally update themselves, showing entries in Patrick's distinctive handwriting that detail other patterns and farming advice. His predictions about frost dates and rainfall have proved remarkably accurate, combining generations of farming wisdom with an uncanny awareness of modern climate patterns. Caitlin has developed a special connection with her spectral great-grandfather. She often sits in the barn after school, apparently receiving lessons in animal husbandry and farm management from our invisible mentor. The techniques she learns combine 19th century wisdom with surprising adaptations for modern farming challenges. During one difficult calving, when the veterinarian was delayed by road conditions, I felt invisible hands guiding mine as I helped deliver the calf. The technique was one I'd never learned, but recognized from stories about how Patrick had handled difficult births. Both cow and calf survived what could have been a tragic loss. The local farming community has come to accept our unusual situation. When neighboring farmers notice our cows are already in the barn before a storm hits, or see our crops planted in traditional patterns that somehow yield better than modern rows, they just nod knowingly. Some even leave offerings of whiskey and bread by the barn door, maintaining old customs their grandparents taught them. Patrick's presence is strongest during the traditional farming festivals, planting, harvest, and the changing of seasons. We often hear him singing old farming songs in Gaelic, their rhythms matching perfectly with modern farming tasks. Caitlin has learned some of these songs, though no living person taught them to her. We've learned to balance modern farming methods with Patrick's traditional wisdom. The old ways and the new work together on our farm, creating a unique blend of past and present. The results speak for themselves. Our dairy products win awards for quality, and our farm maintains its organic certification with surprising ease. Now, when agricultural colleges send students to study our farming methods, we don't mention that some of our techniques come from a 19th century farmer who never officially retired. We simply demonstrate the perfect balance of traditional wisdom and modern science that makes our farm special. After all, some farmers never really leave their land. They just find new ways to tend it, passing their knowledge down through generations, ensuring that the ancient rhythms of farming life continue unchanged despite the modern world's rapid pace. The Blackwell Library at Boston University houses over 1 million volumes in its Gothic Revival building. But its most dedicated librarian hasn't drawn a paycheck since 1923. As head librarian, I've grown accustomed to Agatha Blackwell's continued service, though it took some time to accept that my predecessor from a century ago still maintains her duties. The first signs of Agatha's presence were subtle books reshelving themselves overnight, catalog cards updating with crossed-out errors, and the sound of typing on an ancient Underwood typewriter echoing through empty reading rooms. Students often reported being guided to exactly the right book by an elderly woman in Victorian dress who would vanish when they turned to thank her. Research revealed that Agatha had been more than just a librarian. She was a pioneer in library science, developing cataloging systems that were decades ahead of their time. She died at her desk one winter evening, completing the cross-referencing of a particularly complex collection of medieval manuscripts. Agatha seems most active during finals week, when stressed students fill the library's reading rooms. She has a particular talent for helping them find obscure references and lost citations. Sometimes students will wake from accidentally falling asleep at their desks to find relevant books stacked beside them, with important passages marked by antique brass bookmarks. The most remarkable incidents occur in the rare books room. Agatha takes her preservation duties seriously, often alerting staff to environmental conditions that might damage the collections. During one particularly humid summer, she repeatedly moved valuable manuscripts to drier locations, preventing significant water damage when a pipe burst. She has her own methods of maintaining library order. Students who are too noisy find themselves hushed by an invisible presence, while those who treat books roughly discover their materials mysteriously relocated to the reference section, where they must be used under supervision. More than one attempted book thief has been thwarted by books literally flying back to their shelves. Modern technology doesn't seem to faze her. She's learned to adjust the library's computer catalog, though her entries appear in an elegantly archaic style. Security cameras occasionally capture her image, a tall figure in a high-necked dress, always focused on some library task. During power outages, her ghostly form provides enough light for students to safely exit the building. Agatha takes particular interest in library science students, often leaving them detailed notes about traditional cataloging methods and preservation techniques. These notes, written in faded ink on yellowed paper, contain insights about library management that are still relevant today. Several students have written award-winning theses based on her unofficial mentorship. The library staff has learned to work alongside their spectral colleague. When books appear on our desks with notes about needed repairs, or when the temperature in the rare books room suddenly drops until we check the humidity levels, we know Agatha is just doing her job. She's particularly helpful during inventory, often leading us to misplaced volumes that have eluded discovery for years. During one memorable incident, a visiting scholar was struggling to translate a medieval Latin text. That night after hours, security cameras captured footage of Agatha sitting at a reading desk, carefully writing out a translation. The next morning, the scholar found not only a complete translation, but also notes about similar texts in other libraries' collections connections that led to a breakthrough in their research. We've discovered several of Agatha's journals hidden throughout the library, each containing valuable insights about the collection's history. Her detailed records have helped us trace the provenance of numerous rare volumes and have proved invaluable in maintaining the library's historical integrity. The university administration has learned to accept and even appreciate their unusual staff member. When library budget meetings include discussions about extending hours or improving services, we often find relevant statistics and historical precedents mysteriously appearing in our files, all documented in Agatha's distinctive handwriting. Modern library science students now study alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of old and new methodologies. Agatha's presence reminds us that libraries are more than just repositories of books. They're guardians of knowledge across time, maintained by dedicated professionals who understand that some duties transcend even death. Now, when new staff members comment on books being mysteriously reshelved or card catalogs being mysteriously updated, we simply welcome them to the Blackwell Library, where traditional service takes on a whole new meaning. After all, who better to maintain a historic library than someone who's been doing it for over a century? The Crescent City Hotel stands in New Orleans' French Quarter. Its wrought iron balconies and marble floors, having witnessed nearly 2 centuries of the city's history. As general manager, I've learned that some of our most loyal guests never actually check out. Among them is Pearl Johnson, the jazz singer who made our Blue Room famous in the 1920s. Pearl's story is woven into the hotel's fabric, as intricately as the Art Deco patterns in our lobby ceiling. She performed here during the height of the jazz age, her voice drawing crowds from across the country. On the night she died in 1928, she was in the middle of her signature song, Midnight in New Orleans, when her heart gave out. Her last note, they say, hung in the air long after she collapsed. We first realized Pearl was still with us during renovations in the 1980s. Workers in the Blue Room reported hearing jazz music late at night, though the room had been closed for repairs. The piano would play by itself, always Pearl's favorites, and the smell of gardenias, her signature flower, would fill the air. Pearl seems most active during our jazz nights, particularly when modern performers try to capture the spirit of her era. Musicians often report feeling someone adjusting their timing or phrasing, guiding them toward a more authentic 1920s style. Some have found their sheet music annotated with performance notes in elegant handwriting that matches Pearl's surviving contracts. The most remarkable manifestations occur during particularly good performances. Witnesses have seen a beautiful woman in a beaded flapper dress appear on stage, joining in with perfect harmonies that seem to come from another time. These appearances are often accompanied by the scent of gardenias and the distinctive sound of beaded dress fringe swaying to the music. Pearl takes a special interest in young jazz singers, especially those struggling with classical New Orleans styles. They report dreams of being coached by a woman in vintage clothing, learning techniques that haven't been taught in decades. Several have gone on to successful careers, always crediting their mysterious mentor for teaching them the true spirit of jazz. The hotel's current house band has learned to work with their spectral colleague. They leave the piano lid open at night, knowing Pearl likes to practice after hours. Sometimes they find new arrangements of classic songs waiting for them in the morning. The musical notation, written in a style not used since the 1920s. During one memorable performance, our singer lost her voice just before a crucial show. As the band panicked, the lights dimmed and Pearl appeared, performing a full set of jazz age classics. The audience, assuming it was part of the show, gave a standing ovation. The next day, several music historians contacted us, amazed by the authentic reproduction of lost singing techniques. Pearl's presence extends beyond the Blue Room. She's often seen gliding through the hotel's corridors late at night, her beaded dress catching non-existent light. Room service staff report hearing her practicing scales in empty suites, and guests sometimes wake to the sound of soft jazz coming through their walls, though the neighboring rooms are vacant. We've discovered several of Pearl's personal items hidden throughout the hotel sheet music with her annotations, vintage photographs, and even her diary, which details life as a jazz singer in 1920s New Orleans. These artifacts have proved invaluable to music historians studying the development of early jazz. The hotel's management has embraced our musical resident. We maintain the blue room exactly as it was in her day, down to the placement of the piano and the Art Deco details she loved. During renovations, we've learned to pay attention when equipment mysteriously moves back to its original position. Pearl's suggestions about the room's acoustics invariably prove correct. Modern jazz enthusiasts now consider the Crescent City Hotel a musical pilgrimage site. They come hoping to catch a glimpse of Pearl or hear her legendary voice. Some claim that on quiet nights, when the moon shines through the blue room's stained glass windows, you can still hear her singing Midnight in New Orleans. Her voice as clear and beautiful as it was nearly a century ago. Pearl's continued presence has made our hotel unique among New Orleans' historic properties. While other venues claim jazz heritage, ours has a direct line to the genre's golden age through a performer who never really left the stage. She represents the passion that great music requires, a dedication so deep that not even death can end the performance. WCHC has been broadcasting from downtown Chicago since 1922. Its Art Deco tower, a familiar landmark on the city's skyline. As the night shift DJ, I've grown used to sharing the studio with Robert King, though he hasn't officially been on the air since his last broadcast in 1945. The first time I encountered Robert, I thought someone was playing old station recordings. His distinctive voice, with its perfect mid-Atlantic accent, came through my headphones announcing the time and weather in a style that hadn't been used since the golden age of radio. But when I checked the system, nothing was being broadcast. Research into the station's history revealed that Robert King had been WCHC's premier announcer during the 1930s and 40s. Known for his impeccable diction and unflappable demeanor, he had guided Chicago through the Depression and World War II with his calm, reassuring presence. He died of a heart attack while reading the evening news, his last words being "good night" and "good news tomorrow." Robert seems most active during breaking news stories. Modern equipment will mysteriously malfunction until we adopt his more measured approach to reporting. During one particularly chaotic election night, we found our copy mysteriously edited in his distinctive style, clear, concise, and meticulously fact-checked. The most remarkable incidents occur during technical difficulties. When our modern systems fail, the original 1940s equipment, kept only for display, will suddenly power up, allowing us to continue broadcasting. Engineers swear this shouldn't be possible, as the old equipment isn't connected to anything. Yet Robert somehow makes it work. He takes particular interest in training new announcers, often leaving notes written in elegant script about proper pronunciation and pacing. Young journalists report dreams of being coached by a distinguished gentleman in a vintage suit, learning broadcast techniques that haven't been taught in decades, but prove remarkably effective. During severe weather coverage, Robert's presence becomes more pronounced. He seems to have a sixth sense for dangerous storms, often manipulating equipment to keep us on air when modern systems would have failed. Several times, his intervention has helped us warn communities just minutes before severe weather struck. The most dramatic manifestation occurred during a citywide blackout. As we struggled with backup generators, Robert's voice took over the broadcast, keeping listeners calm with his trademark steady delivery. Engineers later confirmed that our equipment had been completely without power during those crucial minutes. Modern technology doesn't seem to intimidate him. He's learned to operate digital systems, though he prefers to maintain the formality of traditional broadcasting. Security cameras occasionally capture his image, a distinguished man in a 1940s suit, always focused on some broadcasting task. During system updates, files will mysteriously reorder themselves according to his exacting organizational standards. We've discovered several of Robert's original scripts and broadcasting manuals hidden throughout the station. His detailed notes about news delivery and emergency protocols contain insights that are still valuable today. Several of our newer announcers have won awards using techniques learned from these materials. The station's technical staff has learned to work with their spectral colleague. When equipment mysteriously adjusts itself, or when vintage broadcasting manuals appear on our desks, we know Robert is just maintaining his high standards. He's particularly helpful during live broadcasts, often preventing technical glitches before they can occur. The station management has come to appreciate their unusual staff member. During discussions about updating our broadcasting standards, we often find relevant historical examples and precedents mysteriously added to our files, all annotated in Robert's distinctive handwriting. New employees now train alongside traditions from radio's golden age, creating a unique blend of old and new broadcasting techniques. Robert's presence reminds us that radio is more than just technology. It's about connecting with listeners and maintaining standards of excellence that transcend time. Now, when visitors comment on our unusually high broadcasting standards or our ability to maintain calm during crises, we simply credit our traditional broadcasting methods. After all, who better to maintain radio excellence than someone who helped establish those standards in the first place? The Golden Gate Gallery occupies a restored Victorian mansion in San Francisco's Nob Hill district. Its ornate windows offering spectacular views of the bay. As curator, I've grown accustomed to sharing my workspace with Clara Westbrook, though she hasn't picked up a paintbrush, at least not physically, since the great earthquake of 1906. Clara's presence first became apparent during the gallery's renovation. Paintings would rearrange themselves overnight, always in more aesthetically pleasing compositions. Light fixtures would adjust until they provided perfect illumination for each artwork. Most notably, restoration work on damaged paintings would progress mysteriously when no one was in the building. Research revealed that Clara had been a pioneering female artist in the late 19th century, known for her innovative techniques in art preservation. She died protecting her collection during the 1906 earthquake, using her own body to shield priceless artworks from falling debris. Her final painting, left unfinished on her easel, depicted the view of the bay that can still be seen from the gallery's windows. Clara seems most active during exhibition installations. She has an uncanny ability to guide us toward perfect placement of artworks, often by manipulating the gallery's lighting or subtly shifting paintings until they achieve optimal viewing angles. Conservation staff frequently find detailed notes about restoration techniques written in her distinctive hand, describing methods that prove remarkably effective when tested. The most extraordinary manifestations occur in the conservation studio. Modern conservators report feeling invisible hands guiding their work, showing them techniques that haven't been used in over a century. Several badly damaged paintings have been restored using methods that Clara pioneered, their documentation appearing mysteriously in margins of her old notebooks. She takes particular interest in teaching young artists and conservators. Students often report dreams of being instructed by a woman in Victorian dress, learning traditional techniques that aren't taught in modern art schools. Some have discovered their works subtly improved overnight, with corrections that match Clara's documented teaching methods. During one memorable restoration project, we were struggling with a badly damaged landscape from the 1880s. That night, security cameras captured footage of Clara's translucent form working at an easel, demonstrating proper restoration techniques. The next morning, we found detailed instructions written in her hand, leading to a breakthrough in the painting's conservation. Clara's presence extends beyond conservation work. She's known to protect the gallery's collection from potential harm. During a recent earthquake, witnesses saw a spectral figure guiding visitors to safety, while simultaneously ensuring that valuable artworks were secure. The gallery suffered minimal damage, though neighboring buildings weren't as fortunate. We've discovered several of Clara's journals hidden throughout the building, each containing valuable insights about art preservation and gallery management. Her detailed records have helped us understand the provenance of numerous works and have proved invaluable in maintaining the collection's historical integrity. Modern conservation students now study alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of old and new techniques. Clara's presence reminds us that art conservation is more than just science. It's about preserving beauty across time, maintained by dedicated professionals who understand that some passions transcend even death. The gallery has embraced its unusual resident artist. During conservation workshops, we often find additional materials laid out, or demonstrations mysteriously prepared overnight. When visiting experts comment on our unusually successful restoration techniques, we simply credit our traditional methods. Clara seems particularly protective of female artists' works, often drawing attention to overlooked pieces by women painters of her era. Several lost works by female artists have been discovered through her subtle guidance, leading to renewed interest in these forgotten pioneers. The most touching evidence of Clara's continued presence are the occasional new paintings that appear in the conservation studio works completed in her distinctive style, but depicting modern scenes of San Francisco. These paintings, which mysteriously fade away if photographed, show how she sees the city she loves as it changes through time. Now, when visitors admire our perfectly curated exhibitions or marvel at our restoration work, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to maintain an historic art collection than someone who has been doing it for over a century? Morini's Bakery has been a Providence institution since 1892. Its brick ovens producing authentic Italian bread for 5 generations. As the current owner, I've learned that our most valuable family recipe isn't written down anywhere. It's the continuing presence of my grandmother Maria, who hasn't physically kneaded dough since 1958. The first hints of Nana, Maria's continued involvement, came during early morning baking sessions. I'd arrived to find the starter already fed and bubbling, though I'd left it dormant the night before. The old wood-fired oven would be at the perfect temperature, despite no one being there to tend it. Most notably, loaves would appear with her distinctive scoring pattern. 3 quick slashes that she claimed kept the evil eye away. Research through family papers revealed that Maria had been more than just a talented baker. She was a guardian of traditional techniques that dated back to her childhood in Tuscany. She died in the bakery's kitchen, teaching my father her special method for handling delicate pastry dough. Her last words were a reminder about proper oven temperature for ciabatta. Maria seems most active during holiday baking seasons. She has an uncanny ability to predict when dough has proofed perfectly, often preventing overproofed loaves by mysteriously moving them to the oven at exactly the right moment. Sometimes we find notes written in flour on the wooden work table, offering advice about weather conditions affecting the day's baking. The most remarkable manifestations occur during the preparation of traditional Italian pastries. Modern bakers report feeling invisible hands guiding their movements, showing them techniques that haven't been used in generations. Several lost family recipes have been rediscovered through her intervention, appearing mysteriously written in the margins of old cookbooks. She takes particular interest in teaching young bakers, especially those learning traditional Italian methods. Apprentices often report dreams of being instructed by an elderly woman in a flour-dusted apron, learning techniques that aren't taught in modern culinary schools. Some have found their breads mysteriously improved overnight, with corrections that match Maria's documented methods. During one memorable Christmas season, we were struggling with a particularly difficult batch of panettone. That night, security cameras captured footage of Maria's translucent form working at the bench, demonstrating proper folding techniques. The next morning, we found detailed instructions written in her distinctive style, leading to the best panettone we'd ever produced. Maria's presence extends beyond the kitchen. She's known to protect the bakery's reputation for quality. During a recent health inspection, witnesses saw cabinet doors mysteriously opening to reveal immaculately clean storage areas, while less organized spaces remained firmly shut until they could be tidied. We've discovered several of Maria's recipe books hidden throughout the building, each containing valuable insights about traditional baking methods. Her detailed notes about how weather and seasonal changes affect bread making have proved invaluable in maintaining consistent quality throughout the year. Modern baking students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of old and new techniques. Maria's presence reminds us that bread making is more than just following recipes. It's about maintaining traditions that connect generations through the simple act of breaking bread together. The bakery has embraced its unusual resident baker. During busy holiday seasons, we often find additional ingredients prepared overnight, or demonstrations mysteriously set up for the next day's baking classes. When customers comment on our unusually consistent quality, we simply credit our traditional methods. Maria seems particularly protective of the starter she brought from Italy, which we've maintained for over a century. She often appears when it needs attention, ensuring that this living link to our family's past remains healthy. Several times, she's prevented well-meaning but misguided attempts to modernize our traditional recipes. The most touching evidence of her continued presence are the occasional new recipes that appear in our family cookbook, traditional Italian dishes adapted for modern dietary needs, but still maintaining their authentic character. These recipes, which seem to write themselves in her familiar hand, show how she helps our family business adapt to changing times while preserving our heritage. Now, when customers line up around the block for our holiday breads or praise our perfect crusty loaves, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to maintain an historic family bakery than someone who has been doing it for over a century? St. Elizabeth's Academy has educated young women in the Green Mountains of Vermont since 1845. Its Gothic stone buildings and chapel bells marking time much as they did when the school first opened. As a history teacher, I've learned that some of our most dedicated educators never really retired, particularly Sister Agnes, who hasn't officially taught a class since 1928. The first signs of Sister Agnes's continued presence appeared during late-night study sessions in the library. Students would find precisely the right books already laid out on their tables, or discover helpful notes written in elegant 19th century script in the margins of their textbooks. Most notably, the chapel bells would sometimes ring at odd hours, always preceding important announcements or warnings about inclement weather. Research in the school archives revealed that Sister Agnes had been more than just a teacher. She was an educational innovator who believed in combining classical learning with practical skills. She died in her classroom during a winter storm, having stayed late to help students prepare for examinations. Her last words were instructions about proper essay structure. Sister Agnes seems most active during examination periods. She has an uncanny ability to guide struggling students toward helpful resources, often by manipulating library lighting to highlight relevant books, or mysteriously rearranging study materials into more logical sequences. Sometimes students find their notes reorganized overnight, with helpful summaries written in a distinctive hand. The most extraordinary manifestations occur in the old classroom where she taught, now used for advanced history seminars. Modern teachers report feeling an invisible presence guiding their lectures, drawing attention to historical connections that prove remarkably insightful. Several lost teaching materials have been discovered through her intervention, appearing mysteriously in forgotten storage spaces. She takes particular interest in helping students master research skills. Girls often report dreams of being tutored by a nun in an old-fashioned habit, learning study techniques that prove surprisingly effective. Some have found their essays mysteriously edited overnight, with corrections that match Sister Agnes's documented teaching methods. During one memorable winter storm, when modern heating systems failed, witnesses saw a spectral figure in a nun's habit moving through the dormitories, ensuring all students were warm and safe. The next morning, We found detailed instructions about emergency procedures written in her hand, leading to improvements in our crisis management protocols. Sister Agnes's presence extends beyond academics. She's known to maintain the school's high standards of behavior, often preventing mischief through subtle interventions. During one recent attempt at nighttime pranking, students found themselves mysteriously guided back to their dormitories by a gentle but firm, invisible presence. We've discovered several of Sister Agnes's teaching journals hidden throughout the building, each containing valuable insights about educational methods. Her detailed observations about how to engage different types of learners have proved remarkably relevant to modern teaching challenges. Modern students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of classical and contemporary education. Sister Agnes's presence reminds us that teaching is more than just conveying information. It's about nurturing young minds and spirits across generations. The Academy has embraced its unusual faculty member. During teacher training sessions, we often find additional materials prepared overnight, or demonstrations mysteriously arranged for the next day's lessons. When education observers comment on our unusually successful teaching methods, we simply credit our traditional approach. Sister Agnes seems particularly protective of students struggling with self-doubt or personal challenges. She often appears during late-night study sessions, providing quiet encouragement through subtle signs like warm breezes in closed rooms, or the faint scent of chalk and leather-bound books. The most touching evidence of her continued presence are the occasional new teaching materials that appear in the faculty room, traditional lessons adapted for modern students, but still maintaining their classical rigor. These materials, which seem to materialize in her precise handwriting, show how she helps the Academy adapt to changing times while preserving its educational heritage. Now, when visitors marvel at our students' unusual poise and academic achievement, or praise our blend of tradition and innovation, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to maintain an historic academy's standards than someone who has been doing it for nearly a century? The Silver Sage Workshop sits in the heart of Old Santa Fe, its adobe walls holding centuries of silversmithing tradition. As a modern jeweler specializing in Native American designs, I've learned that our most valuable mentor hasn't physically touched his tools since 1882. Thomas Silversmith, a master craftsman who bridged Navajo traditions with Victorian commerce, still guides our work from beyond. The first signs of Thomas's continued presence appeared during late-night soldering sessions. Tools would arrange themselves in traditional patterns. Silver would inexplicably maintain perfect working temperature, and intricate designs would appear sketched in the workshop dust. Most remarkably, troubled pieces would somehow correct themselves overnight, showing evidence of techniques that hadn't been used in over a century. Research through territorial records revealed that Thomas had been more than just a silversmith. He was a cultural bridge builder who helped preserve traditional Native American jewelry techniques during a time of forced assimilation. He died at his workbench during a winter storm, completing a ceremonial piece for a Navajo elder. His last words were instructions about proper blessing ceremonies for new silver. Thomas seems most active during the creation of traditional pieces, He has an uncanny ability to guide our hands during difficult techniques, often preventing mistakes before they happen. Sometimes we find notes scratched into the silver dust on our benches, offering advice about working with particular stones or metals in ways that match ancient methods perfectly. The most extraordinary manifestations occur during the creation of ceremonial pieces. Modern artisans report feeling invisible hands guiding their work, showing them techniques that haven't been taught in generations. Several lost design patterns have been rediscovered through his intervention, appearing mysteriously traced on old leather work aprons. He takes particular interest in teaching young craftspeople, especially those learning traditional Native American methods. Apprentices often report dreams of being instructed by a tall man in Victorian dress with Navajo silver buttons, learning techniques that combine multiple cultural traditions. Some have found their work mysteriously improved overnight, with corrections that match Thomas's documented methods. During one memorable restoration project, we were struggling with a damaged 19th century squash blossom necklace. That night, security cameras captured footage of Thomas's translucent form working at the bench, demonstrating proper restoration techniques. The next morning, we found detailed instructions written in both English and Navajo, leading to a perfect restoration. Thomas's presence extends beyond metalwork. He's known to protect the workshop's spiritual integrity. During smudging ceremonies, the smoke often forms patterns that match traditional Navajo blessing symbols. He seems particularly active during full moons and solstices, times traditionally considered powerful for silverwork. We've discovered several of Thomas's journals hidden throughout the building, each containing valuable insights about combining European and Native American techniques. His detailed notes about the spiritual significance of different designs and materials have proved invaluable in maintaining authentic cultural practices. Modern jewelry students now learn alongside traditions from multiple cultures, creating a unique blend of old and new techniques. Thomas's presence reminds us that craftsmanship is more than just technical skill. It's about maintaining cultural connections that bridge different worlds and transcend time itself. The workshop has embraced its unusual master craftsmen. During teaching sessions, we often find traditional tools and materials laid out in specific patterns, or demonstrations mysteriously prepared for the next day's lessons. When collectors comment on our unusually authentic pieces, we simply credit our traditional methods. Thomas seems particularly protective of pieces intended for ceremonial use. He often appears during their creation, ensuring that proper protocols are followed and traditional blessings are maintained. Several times, he's prevented well-meaning but culturally inappropriate modifications to traditional designs. The most touching evidence of his continued presence are the occasional new designs that appear in our workshop journals, traditional patterns adapted for modern tastes, but still maintaining their cultural significance. These designs, which seem to sketch themselves in his distinctive style, show how he helps us adapt ancient traditions for contemporary audiences while preserving their sacred meaning. Now, when visitors admire our unique blend of traditional and modern jewelry, or praise our understanding of cultural significance, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, Who better to maintain these sacred traditions than someone who has been bridging cultural worlds for over a century? The Sterling Observatory stands atop Mount Aurora in Colorado, its copper dome gleaming against the Rocky Mountain sky since 1875. As the current director of astronomical research, I've discovered that our most dedicated observer hasn't physically looked through a telescope since 1924. Professor William Sterling, the facility's founder, continues his celestial observations long after his mortal eyes closed. The first hints of Professor Sterling's continued presence came during late-night observation sessions. The massive Victorian telescope would adjust itself to precise coordinates, tracking previously unknown celestial phenomena. Star charts would appear annotated in spidery 19th century handwriting, marking unusual stellar behaviors that modern instruments would later confirm. Research through observatory records revealed that Sterling had been more than just an astronomer. He was a visionary who combined mathematical precision with almost mystical insight into cosmic patterns. He died at his beloved telescope during a meteor shower, recording observations until his final breath. His last words were calculations about a comet's return. Sterling seems most active during significant astronomical events. He has an uncanny ability to direct attention to important celestial phenomena, often by manipulating the observatory's antique instruments to point toward unexpected discoveries. Sometimes we find complex astronomical calculations written in frost on the dome's windows, predicting events that our modern computers later verify. The most extraordinary manifestations occur during rare astronomical alignments. Modern astronomers report feeling invisible hands adjusting their telescopes, guiding them toward phenomena that haven't been observed in generations. Several lost stellar objects have been rediscovered through his intervention, appearing precisely where his old notes predicted. He takes particular interest in teaching young astronomers, especially those learning to balance modern technology with traditional observational skills. Students often report dreams of being instructed by a Victorian gentleman in a night coat, learning techniques that combine classical methods with contemporary understanding. Some have found their research mysteriously supplemented overnight, with insights that match Sterling's documented approaches. During one memorable night of observations, we were struggling to track an unusual stellar phenomenon. Suddenly, the ancient brass telescope, unused for decades, began moving on its own, focusing on exactly the right coordinates. The next morning, we found detailed notes written in Sterling's hand, leading to a significant discovery about stellar behavior. Sterling's presence extends beyond the observatory dome. He's known to maintain the facility's scientific integrity, often preventing equipment malfunctions before they occur. During power outages, the old mechanical tracking systems mysteriously continue functioning, allowing crucial observations to continue uninterrupted. We've discovered several of Sterling's journals hidden throughout the building, each containing valuable insights about astronomical observation. His detailed records of celestial patterns and mathematical predictions have proved remarkably accurate when analyzed with modern technology. Modern astronomy students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of classical observation and contemporary technology. Stirling's presence reminds us that astronomy is more than just data collection. It's about maintaining our connection to the cosmic dance that has fascinated humans throughout history. The observatory has embraced its unusual senior researcher. During important celestial events, we often find the antique instruments already perfectly aligned, or calculations mysteriously prepared for the night's observations. When visiting scientists comment on our unusually successful research programs, we simply credit our traditional methods. Stirling seems particularly protective of the original Victorian telescope he helped design. He often appears during its maintenance, ensuring that proper care is taken with its historic mechanisms. Several times, he's prevented well-meaning but potentially damaging modernization attempts. The most touching evidence of his continued presence are the occasional new theoretical papers that appear in our archives, classical astronomical principles adapted to explain modern discoveries, but still maintaining their mathematical elegance. These papers, which seem to write themselves in his precise hand, show how he helps us understand the universe through both historical and contemporary lenses. Now, when visitors marvel at our unique combination of historic and modern astronomical techniques, or praise our ability to make significant discoveries with relatively modest equipment, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to guide our observations of the eternal cosmos than someone who has been studying it for over a century? Greenwood Gardens spreads across 30 acres of Boston's historic district. Its Victorian pathways and formal gardens, a living museum of 19th century landscape design. As head gardener, I've learned that our most dedicated landscaper hasn't physically pruned a rose since 1893. Henry Greenwood, the park's original designer, continues to shape its growth from beyond the mortal realm. The first signs of Henry's continued presence appeared during spring planting. Garden beds would reshape themselves overnight into more harmonious patterns. Trees would mysteriously prune themselves to perfect proportions, and antique roses would bloom out of season. Most remarkably, lost varieties of flowers would suddenly appear in forgotten corners, varieties that hadn't been seen since Victorian times. Research through city archives revealed that Henry had been more than just a gardener. He was a visionary who combined European formal garden design with Native American plants, creating sustainable landscapes before the concept existed. He died among his beloved roses during an autumn storm, completing the design for a new water garden. His last words were instructions about proper soil preparation. Henry seems most active during significant seasonal changes. He has an uncanny ability to predict weather patterns affecting the gardens, often protecting delicate plants before unexpected frosts, or preparing drainage systems before heavy rains. Sometimes we find detailed botanical notes written in morning dew on the greenhouse glass, offering advice about plant care that matches century-old techniques perfectly. The most extraordinary manifestations occur during major garden renovations. Modern gardeners report feeling invisible hands guiding their work, showing them techniques that haven't been taught in generations. Several lost garden designs have been rediscovered through his intervention, appearing mysteriously sketched on old garden maps. He takes particular interest in teaching young horticulturists, especially those learning to balance formal design with natural ecosystems. Students often report dreams of being instructed by a Victorian gentleman in gardening tweeds, learning techniques that combine traditional methods with environmental awareness. Some have found their garden plots mysteriously improved overnight, with adjustments that match Henry's documented principles. During one memorable restoration project, we were struggling to recreate a complex Victorian knot garden. That night, security cameras captured footage of Henry's translucent form working in the gardens, demonstrating proper layout techniques. The next morning, we found detailed plans written in his hand, leading to a perfect recreation of the historical design. Henry's presence extends beyond ornamental gardens. He's known to maintain the park's ecological balance, often preventing pest problems before they develop or guiding wildlife to appropriate habitats. During droughts, the gardens somehow remain vibrant, benefiting from ancient water conservation techniques that appear mysteriously implemented. We've discovered several of Henry's journals hidden throughout the garden structures, each containing valuable insights about sustainable Victorian gardening. His detailed notes about native plant uses and natural pest control have proved remarkably relevant to modern organic gardening practices. Modern horticulture students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of historical and contemporary garden management. Henry's presence reminds us that gardening is more than just plant maintenance. It's about creating living spaces that connect human design with natural patterns across generations. The gardens have embraced their unusual head gardener. During seasonal changes, we often find garden tools arranged in specific patterns, or demonstration plots mysteriously prepared for the next day's lessons. When visitors comment on our unusually successful blend of formal and natural landscaping, we simply credit our traditional methods. Henry seems particularly protective of the original Victorian plant specimens he helped establish. He often appears during their care, ensuring that proper historical techniques are used. Several times, he's prevented well-meaning but potentially damaging modernization attempts that would have compromised the garden's historical integrity. The most touching evidence of his continued presence are the occasional new garden designs that appear in our planning books, traditional Victorian patterns adapted for climate change challenges, but still maintaining their formal beauty. These designs, which seem to draw themselves in his precise style, show how he helps us adapt historical gardens for contemporary environmental challenges while preserving their original vision. Now, when visitors marvel at our unique combination of Victorian formality and natural sustainability, or praise our ability to maintain historical accuracy while meeting modern environmental challenges, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to guide these living historical treasures than someone who has been tending them for over a century? The Anderson family vineyard stretches across the sun-drenched slopes of Napa Valley, its limestone caves dating back to the Gold Rush era. As head winemaker, I've discovered our most experienced vintner hasn't physically tasted wine since 1878. Jean-Pierre Dubois, who established our vineyard after fleeing the European phylloxera epidemic, continues to oversee each vintage from beyond. The first signs of Jean Pierre's presence appeared during harvest seasons. Grapes would mysteriously ripen at perfect intervals. Temperature gauges in the caves would adjust themselves to ideal conditions, and wine barrels would spontaneously rotate to prevent sediment buildup. Most remarkably, troubled fermentations would correct themselves overnight, showing evidence of techniques that hadn't been used since the 19th century. Research through family records revealed that Jean Pierre had been more than just a winemaker. He was a pioneer who combined old-world traditions with new-world innovation. He died in the wine cave during the harvest of 1878, completing the blending of what would become our most celebrated vintage. His last words were instructions about proper barrel aging. Jean Pierre seems most active during crucial winemaking phases. He has an uncanny ability to predict fermentation problems, often preventing disasters before they occur. Sometimes we find notes scratched into the cave walls in elegant French script, offering advice about specific vintages that matches traditional techniques perfectly. The most extraordinary manifestations occur during blending sessions. Modern winemakers report feeling invisible hands guiding their measurements, showing them combinations that haven't been attempted in generations. Several lost wine recipes have been rediscovered through his intervention, appearing mysteriously written on old barrel staves. He takes particular interest in teaching young vintners, especially those learning traditional French methods. Apprentices often report dreams of being instructed by a distinguished Frenchman in 19th century dress, learning techniques that combine old-world wisdom with new-world conditions. Some have found their experimental blends mysteriously adjusted overnight, with improvements that match Jean Pierre's documented methods. During one memorable harvest crisis, we were struggling with an unusual grape chemistry that threatened the entire vintage. That night, security cameras captured footage of Jean Pierre's translucent form moving through the caves, adjusting equipment and adding precise amounts of nutrients to specific tanks. The next morning, we found detailed instructions written in French and English, leading to a perfect fermentation. Jean Pierre's presence extends beyond winemaking. He's known to maintain the vineyard's terroir integrity, often preventing changes that would harm the soil's unique character. During droughts, certain vineyard blocks somehow remain perfectly hydrated, benefiting from ancient water conservation techniques that appear mysteriously implemented. We've discovered several of Jean Pierre's journals hidden throughout the caves, each containing valuable insights about matching European grapes to California conditions. His detailed notes about soil composition and microclimate effects have proved remarkably relevant to modern climate change challenges. Modern winemaking students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of historical and contemporary techniques. Jean Pierre's presence reminds us that winemaking is more than just chemistry. It's about maintaining connections between land, culture, and craft across generations. The winery has embraced its unusual cellar master. During crucial moments in the winemaking process, we often find traditional tools laid out in specific patterns, or test blends mysteriously prepared for the next day's tastings. When critics praise our unusually consistent quality and old-world character, we simply credit our traditional methods. Jean-Pierre seems particularly protective of our oldest vineyard blocks, planted with cuttings he brought from France. He often appears during their pruning and maintenance, ensuring that proper historical techniques are used. Several times, he's prevented well-meaning but potentially damaging modernization attempts that would have compromised the wine's traditional character. The most touching evidence of his continued presence are the occasional new wine blends that appear in our cellar books, traditional French styles, adapted for changing climate conditions, but still maintaining their historical essence. These recipes, which seem to write themselves in his flowing hand, show how he helps us adapt classical winemaking for contemporary challenges while preserving its timeless principles. Now, when visitors marvel at our unique combination of European tradition and California innovation, or praise our ability to maintain historical character while meeting modern market demands, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to guide these living wines than someone who has been crafting them for over a century? The Clockwork Sanctuary occupies a narrow Victorian shopfront in Providence's historic district, its windows filled with timepieces that have marked the hours for generations. As master horologist, I've learned our most skilled craftsman hasn't physically wound a clock since 1895. Edward Cronwell, who once crafted timepieces for New England's merchant princes, continues his precision work from beyond. The first hints of Edward's presence appeared during complex restorations. Delicate gear trains would align themselves perfectly overnight. Ancient mainsprings would mysteriously unwind safely, and tarnished brass would suddenly gleam as if freshly polished. Most remarkably, complicated mechanisms would repair themselves, showing evidence of techniques that hadn't been used since Queen Victoria's reign. Research through guild records revealed that Edward had been more than just a clockmaker. He was an innovator who combined traditional craftsmanship with mathematical precision. He died at his workbench during a winter storm, completing an astronomical clock that could track planetary movements. His last words were instructions about proper gear tooth profiles. Edward seems most active during intricate repairs. He has an uncanny ability to diagnose mechanical problems, often preventing damage before it occurs. Sometimes we find technical drawings sketched in clock dust on the workbench, offering solutions that match 19th century horological texts perfectly. The most extraordinary manifestations occur during work on rare timepieces. Modern craftsmen report feeling invisible hands guiding their tools, showing them techniques that haven't been taught in generations. Several lost clock mechanisms have been rediscovered through his intervention, appearing mysteriously detailed in old repair ledgers. He takes particular interest in teaching young horologists, especially those learning traditional handcrafting methods. Apprentices often report dreams of being instructed by a Victorian gentleman in a watchmaker's apron, learning techniques that combine classical precision with modern understanding. Some have found their practice pieces mysteriously improved overnight, with adjustments that match Edward's documented standards. During one memorable restoration of a complex Grand Complication pocket watch, we were struggling with its unique calendar mechanism. That night, security cameras captured footage of Edward's translucent form at the workbench, demonstrating proper adjustment techniques. The next morning, we found detailed diagrams written in his hand, leading to a perfect repair. Edward's presence extends beyond mechanical work. He's known to maintain the shop's collection of antique tools, often preventing rust or damage before it becomes visible. During power outages, the shop's ancient mechanical clocks continue marking perfect time, regulated by unseen hands. We've discovered several of Edward's technical journals hidden throughout the workshop, each containing valuable insights about historical timepiece construction. His detailed notes about compensating for temperature changes and atmospheric pressure have proved remarkably relevant to modern chronometer certification. Modern horology students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of historical craftsmanship and contemporary technology. Edward's presence reminds us that clockmaking is more than just mechanics. It's about maintaining humanity's relationship with time itself across generations. The workshop has embraced its unusual master craftsmen. During complicated repairs, we often find antique tools arranged in specific patterns, or demonstration movements mysteriously assembled for the next day's lessons. When collectors praise our unusually successful restorations of rare timepieces, we simply credit our traditional methods. Edward seems particularly protective of the original tools and techniques he once used. He often appears during their maintenance, ensuring that proper historical methods are preserved. Several times, he's prevented well-meaning but potentially damaging attempts to modernize traditional repair processes. The most touching evidence of his continued presence are the occasional new clock designs that appear in our workbook's traditional mechanisms adapted for modern materials, but still maintaining their historical precision. These designs, which seem to draft themselves in his precise technical hand, show how he helps us adapt classical horology for contemporary needs while preserving its timeless principles. Now, when visitors marvel at our unique combination of Victorian craftsmanship and modern precision, or praise our ability to maintain historical accuracy while meeting contemporary standards, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to guide these timekeeping treasures than someone who has been crafting them for over a century? The Liberty Press occupies a 3-story brick building in Philadelphia's Old City, its wooden floors still bearing the imprints of 19th century printing presses. As master printer, I've discovered our most experienced typesetter hasn't physically handled lead type since 1872. Benjamin Webster, who once printed broadsheets announcing Union victories, continues his craft from beyond. The first signs of Benjamin's presence appeared during complex letterpress projects. Type would arrange itself in perfect spacing overnight. Press pressure would mysteriously adjust to ideal settings, and paper would feed through ancient machines without a single misfeed. Most remarkably, worn type would somehow produce crystal-clear impressions, showing evidence of inking techniques that hadn't been used since the Civil War. Research through Printers Guild records revealed that Benjamin had been more than just a printer. He was a craftsman who combined traditional typography with innovative designs. He died at his press during a winter storm, completing the first edition of a controversial abolitionist newspaper. His last words were instructions about proper lead temperature for casting type. Benjamin seems most active during important printing projects. He has an uncanny ability to prevent printing problems, often adjusting equipment before issues arise. Sometimes we find notes written in printer's ink on proof sheets, offering advice about composition that matches 19th century manuals perfectly. The most extraordinary manifestations occur during work on historical reproductions. Modern printers report feeling invisible hands guiding their movements, showing them techniques that haven't been taught in generations. Several lost typefaces have been rediscovered through his intervention, appearing mysteriously arranged in ancient type cases. He takes particular interest in teaching young printers, especially those learning traditional letterpress methods. Apprentices often report dreams of being instructed by a gentleman in ink-stained sleeves, learning techniques that combine classical craftsmanship with modern design. Some have found their practice sheets mysteriously improved overnight, with adjustments that match Benjamin's documented standards. During one memorable restoration of a Civil War-era newspaper page, we were struggling with matching the original typeface. That night, security cameras captured footage of Benjamin's translucent form at the type cabinet, demonstrating proper composition techniques. The next morning, we found detailed instructions written in his hand, leading to a perfect reproduction. Benjamin's presence extends beyond printing. He's known to maintain the shop's collection of historical type, often preventing oxidation or damage before it becomes visible. During power outages, the shop's ancient hand presses remain operational, guided by unseen expertise. We've discovered several of Benjamin's journals hidden throughout the print shop, each containing valuable insights about historical printing methods. His detailed notes about paper grain and ink consistency have proved remarkably relevant to modern fine press work. Modern printing students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of historical craftsmanship and contemporary design. Benjamin's presence reminds us that printing is more than just reproduction. It's about maintaining humanity's relationship with the written word across generations. The print shop has embraced its unusual master printer. During complex projects, we often find antique tools arranged in specific patterns, or demonstration pages mysteriously composed for the next day's lessons. When clients praise our unusually authentic historical reproductions, we simply credit our traditional methods. Benjamin seems particularly protective of the original equipment and techniques he once used. He often appears during their maintenance, ensuring that proper historical methods are preserved. Several times, he's prevented well-meaning but potentially damaging attempts to modernize traditional printing processes. The most touching evidence of his continued presence are the occasional new designs that appear in our specimen book's traditional typography, adapted for modern content, but still maintaining its historical elegance. These designs, which seem to compose themselves in his precise style, show how he helps us adapt classical printing for contemporary needs while preserving its timeless principles. Now, when visitors marvel at our unique combination of Victorian craftsmanship and modern design, or praise our ability to maintain historical accuracy while meeting contemporary standards, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, Who better to guide these printing treasures than someone who has been crafting them for over a century? The Hoffman Brewery stands proud in Milwaukee's historic German district. Its brick smokestack, rising above copper kettles that have been brewing beer since 1856. As brewmaster, I've learned our most experienced beer maker hasn't physically tasted a brew since 1883. Klaus Müller, who brought his family's centuries-old recipes from Bavaria, continues to perfect our beer from beyond. The first signs of Klaus's presence appeared during crucial brewing stages. Temperatures would adjust themselves to perfect levels, fermentation would progress at ideal rates, and hops would mysteriously blend in precise proportions. Most remarkably, troubled batches would correct themselves overnight, showing evidence of techniques that hadn't been used since Imperial Germany. Research through brewery records revealed that Klaus had been more than just a brewmaster. He was a guardian of traditional German brewing methods during America's industrialization. He died in the fermentation cellar during a winter storm, completing notes about a new lager recipe. His last words were instructions about proper yeast handling. Klaus seems most active during traditional German-style brews. He has an uncanny ability to predict fermentation problems, often preventing disasters before they occur. Sometimes we find notes scratched in German script on barrel heads, offering advice about specific recipes that matches centuries-old techniques perfectly. The most extraordinary manifestations occur during brewing of our seasonal specialties. Modern brewers report feeling invisible hands adjusting grain mills, showing them combinations that haven't been attempted in generations. Several lost beer recipes have been rediscovered through his intervention, appearing mysteriously written on old ledger pages. He takes particular interest in teaching young brewers, especially those learning traditional German methods. Apprentices often report dreams of being instructed by a robust German gentleman in 19th century dress, learning techniques that combine old-world wisdom with modern equipment. Some have found their experimental brews mysteriously adjusted overnight, with improvements that match Klaus's documented methods. During one memorable Oktoberfest crisis, we were struggling with an unusual grain bill that threatened our seasonal beer. That night, security cameras captured footage of Klaus's translucent form moving through the brewery, adjusting equipment and adding precise amounts of specialty malts. The next morning, we found detailed instructions written in German and English, leading to a perfect fest beer. Klaus's presence extends beyond brewing. He's known to maintain the brewery's cultural integrity, often preventing changes that would compromise traditional methods. During grain shortages, certain recipes somehow maintain perfect consistency, benefiting from ancient conservation techniques that appear mysteriously implemented. We've discovered several of Klaus's journals hidden throughout the brewery, each containing valuable insights about matching German brewing traditions to American ingredients. His detailed notes about water chemistry and grain selection have proved remarkably relevant to modern craft brewing challenges. Modern brewing students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of historical and contemporary techniques. Klaus's presence reminds us that brewing is more than just chemistry. It's about maintaining connections between culture, craft, and community across generations. The brewery has embraced its unusual brewmaster. During crucial moments in the brewing process, we often find traditional tools laid out in specific patterns, or test batches mysteriously prepared for the next day's tastings. When beer judges praise our unusually authentic German character, we simply credit our traditional methods. Klaus seems particularly protective of our oldest recipes, brought over from his family's brewery in Bavaria. He often appears during their production, ensuring that proper historical techniques are used. Several times, he's prevented well-meaning but potentially damaging modernization attempts that would have compromised the beer's traditional character. The most touching evidence of his continued presence are the occasional new beer recipes that appear in our brewing book's traditional German styles, adapted for American tastes, but still maintaining their historical essence. These recipes, which seem to write themselves in his flowing hand, show how he helps us adapt classical brewing for contemporary palates while preserving its timeless principles. Now, when visitors marvel at our unique combination of German tradition and American craft brewing, or praise our ability to maintain historical authenticity while meeting modern tastes, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to guide these living traditions than someone who has been brewing them for over a century? The Fontaine Conservatory occupies a Gilded Age mansion on Manhattan's Upper West Side, its mahogany-paneled halls still resonating with melodies from another era. As piano department head, I've discovered our most accomplished instructor hasn't physically touched a keyboard since 1923. Isabella Fontaine, once the toast of Carnegie Hall, continues to shape young musicians from beyond. The first hints of Isabella's presence appeared during late-night practice sessions. Piano keys would depress themselves in perfect demonstration of difficult passages. Metronomes would mysteriously adjust to ideal tempos, and sheet music would turn to exactly the right page. Most remarkably, students struggling with particularly challenging pieces would find their technical problems solved after practicing in certain rooms. Research through conservatory archives revealed that Isabella had been more than just a pianist. She was a revolutionary teacher who combined European classical training with innovative American methods. She died at her beloved Steinway during a master class, completing a demonstration of a particularly challenging Chopin etude. Her last words were instructions about proper wrist position. Isabella seems most active during important recital preparations. She has an uncanny ability to guide students through difficult passages, often preventing technical problems before they become habits. Sometimes we find performance notes written in elegant script on sheet music margins, offering interpretations that match historical recordings perfectly. The most extraordinary manifestations occurred during work on Romantic-era pieces, her specialty. Modern students report feeling invisible hands, adjusting their posture and hand positions, showing them techniques that haven't been taught in generations. Several lost interpretations of classic works have been rediscovered through her intervention, appearing mysteriously annotated in old scores. She takes particular interest in teaching young pianists, especially those struggling with performance anxiety. Students often report dreams of being instructed by an elegant woman in Edwardian dress, learning techniques that combine classical discipline with emotional freedom. Some have found their interpretations mysteriously refined overnight, with nuances that match Isabella's documented style. During one memorable pre-competition crisis, a student was struggling with Liszt's notorious La Campanella. That night, security cameras captured footage of Isabella's translucent form at the piano, demonstrating proper execution of the piece's most difficult passages. The next morning, we found detailed fingerings written in her hand, leading to a competition-winning performance. Isabella's presence extends beyond teaching. She's known to maintain the conservatory's collection of historic instruments, often preventing damage before it becomes visible. During power outages, students report hearing perfect piano music from dark practice rooms, guided by unseen hands. We've discovered several of Isabella's teaching journals hidden throughout the mansion, each containing valuable insights about piano pedagogy. Her detailed notes about combining technical precision with emotional expression have proved remarkably relevant to modern performance challenges. Modern piano students now learn alongside traditions from the past, creating a unique blend of historical and contemporary techniques. Isabella's presence reminds us that music is more than just notes on a page. It's about maintaining connections between artist, instrument, and audience across generations. The conservatory has embraced its unusual faculty member. During important performances, we often find practice rooms mysteriously prepared, or demonstration pieces perfectly executed for the next day's lessons. When critics praise our students' unusually mature interpretations, we simply credit our traditional methods. Isabella seems particularly protective of the Steinway grand piano she once owned, which still occupies her former studio. She often appears during its maintenance, ensuring that proper historical techniques are used in its care. Several times, she's prevented well-meaning but potentially damaging modernization attempts that would have compromised the instrument's character. The most touching evidence of her continued presence are the occasional new interpretations that appear in our library traditional pieces adapted for modern sensibilities, but still maintaining their historical depth. These interpretations, which seem to write themselves in her flowing hand, show how she helps us adapt classical music for contemporary audiences while preserving its timeless emotion. Now, when visitors marvel at our unique combination of technical precision and emotional depth, or praise our ability to maintain classical traditions while meeting modern performance standards, we acknowledge our debt to the past. After all, who better to guide young musicians than someone who has been teaching them for over a century? Thank you for spending this time with Brad Arrows. We hope the stories whispered through the rain carried you far into your imagination or your dreams. If you're still awake, let us know how you liked the journey. Until next time, stay safe, sleep well, and let the darkness comfort you.